are now listening to a Forward Mile Podcast Network production.
All right, and welcome to the next episode of the Vegas Squares podcast. We are sitting here in a breezy studio. Man, that freaking fan is killing me right now. Spike, what's up? Are you back from your new convention?
Yeah, I had a good time in Pasadena at QuiltCon 2018.
Wait. Quilt?
QuiltCon, yes, not knitting, it's quilting. And
we were making fun of knitting last episode.
Yeah, no, my wife would actually, if she were here, she would explain in great detail the differences between the two. All I know is that there was a bunch of fabric. There was a bunch of really ugly middle-aged ladies that were pushing me around in the vendor room.
Well, Spike, I can say that if your wife was upset by our jokes on the podcast, maybe you can comfort her.
I mean, this is hilarious that you
Get it?
Hilarious
Comfort her.
She actually listens to this fucking trade.
Oh, she does. You guys listen. She told me you listened to like 3 episodes on the way back from California.
Ugh, God, no.
I like the term knitting. It can go more than one way.
Do tell.
Could be knitting up on the poker table or sports betting or knitting with the yarn.
How do you knit sports betting?
Only bet the Patriots.
I'm sure I can find a way.
Only bet the Patriots. Only bet the Patriots against any team other than the Dolphins.
Let's not picking that up. Hold on. Oh, I guess we should turn it on.
Oh, did I turn it off?
You turned it off. Yeah.
Oh, God.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Wow.
what you
And
didn't hear was
professionals
our guest in the episode who his mic was turned on and then off. So we got Spike, we got Token Tony, and our guest tonight is Sonny. Sonny, what's up, brother?
Not too much. How about you?
Yeah, doing well, doing well. We're going to figure out all the circus of this because there's a lot going on in a lot of different sports. So we're going to try to make sense of a little bit of each of it. We've got NHL Trade Deadline rumors and happenings, obviously on the ice. We've got some things going on off the on the gridiron. Let's hope we're not trying to reinvent new offenses like we did, 2 episodes ago, putting 2 white, slow quarterbacks in a backfield, an option backfield.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go right? We've got some trades happening in the NFL as well. Let's dive right into it. Let's start on the gridiron and talk Jarvis Landry because I'm reading the first article that I see here, and it makes me laugh because of the general nature of Jarvis Landry. I guess he's worth the $16 million headache.
Oh, I'm talking? All right.
If you'd like to talk, yes.
Yeah.
That's what when we hit the record button, that's what you're supposed to do.
I don't know. I've been away from this for too long.
After
days have been?
Token Tony's last input on football, I lean to you first because we need knowledgeable insight, and then we go, oh God, cross our fingers, hold our breath. What the hell's going to come out of his mouth?
Earmuff it.
Fair enough. So I guess the first concern is, are receivers these days valuable enough to demand that kind of money? And I'm not entirely convinced they are. It seems like the deep threat, the traditional 1,200...
I'm glad you said threat, not throat. Sorry, go ahead.
You know, I'm on a train of thought here, and he just has to come and drop trow and shit all over it. And I don't know.
That's a very vivid description of what I figuratively did. That's
how I can expect it to work.
Is it like that South Park episode, Make Love Not Work Raft, where Cartman's like, Mom, grab the pan. I'm kind of shit.
Considering the last episode I saw of South Park was in 6th grade, I don't know that one. So, okay, go ahead, Mr. Jarvis Landry expert. My apologies, sir.
Why? All right.
You can go back to quilting if you'd like.
I might need to after this.
Well, actually, you have Anthony in stitches. Bazinga.
I should have worn my Bazinga t-shirt.
All right, well, So now that you've completely lost your train of thought, you got to get it back now.
So my thought was, are the true deep threat receivers worth the $16 million a year that Landry seems to be getting, or at least that's his cap hit for this coming year? I just don't know that kind of relying on that kind of one superstar wide receiver is the way that offenses are working in the NFL these days. Because you look at teams that do well on offense, like the Packers, like the Patriots, like Seattle, like any of these teams that have 2 or 3 good, not superstar, but really good wide receivers, plus a tight end, plus a running back coming out of the backfield. It's more offense by committee, and I don't know that committing that much money to one skill position person is worth it.
Now, Anthony, they've signed him to what they call as the non-exclusive franchise tender, which we all know what the franchise tag is. You slap it on him, he gets paid, the median salary of the top 10 or top 5 players, the top 5 players. The non-exclusive works a little differently. He is going to get the average salary of the top 10 players in the NFL, but teams also still have the ability to negotiate with him and sign him to a deal, meaning that they would have to give up 2 first-round picks. I can't imagine with this offer sheet anyone doing it, but do you see any teams kind of maybe considering, looking at Landry, and is he worth that kind of cheddar to give up as 2 first-round picks to another team?
I don't see it happening.
I don't know if there's a reason they signed him to the non-exclusive. Does that mean that they don't really trust his or they don't really have confidence in Landry, or they're kind of hoping that somebody maybe is dumb enough to kick the tires on him?
I think they're more leaning towards somebody being stupid enough to try and negotiate a deal. Maybe Cleveland might, but not fill out the paperwork.
I feel so bad for them. They just get shit on everywhere. So,
realistically, I don't see any team going after him.
Now, Sonny, the guy's got 400 catches over 4 years. Obviously, I'm not a math expert, but that's 100 catches a year on average. He had 9 touchdowns last year. He's a vertical threat, but most of his damage is done in the slot. And like Spike was saying, Randall Cobb, Wes Welker, Julian Edelman, these slot receiver guys aren't getting $16 million a year. So what are your initial thoughts on this?
Well, I think that's what it comes down to is who's getting that kind of money. And, we see it in other sports where people are getting way overpaid for mediocrity. And I think it's starting to skew things now to the NFL, where they're saying, hey, wait a second, okay is $16 million.
Right. And that was the thing with a lot of the receivers. Dez Bryant's another one who's, the Cowboys are kind of unhappy with the way that he's performed, given the fact that he's making close to that kind of money as well. What does this do, Sonny, for a guy like Dez, who's probably not going to end up in Dallas next year, who thinks he's still worth this money? How does this contract or this tag impact a guy like him?
Well, does it put him on a garbage team that says, hey, we want to take the risk, or does it kind of put him in the unemployment line? Where, and I think that's what you're seeing a lot of in sports. I think you're seeing it in football. Basketball's a little different case, but you're seeing in football, and you're starting to now see it in hockey, and you're seeing in other sports where, teams are just like, no, we're just in the business of not paying that.
Yeah, and I think on one hand, the $16 million number is an eye opener, but at the same time, we're talking about a guy who for the next year is going to be making that, and then he's going to have to go out and reprove himself even after 100 catches a season for the last 4 years. But this is a guy who off the field has been very undisciplined at this point. He just can't really seem to keep his mouth shut. Is Miami just kind of giving him his last, here's your parting gift, kind of a rah-rah, but I don't know if they actually see this guy as a long-term future for them, because he hasn't matured at all in the last 4 years. He's been kind of a topic of a lot of discussions in terms of maturity, and essentially he's a leader of that team, and that team has maturity and discipline issues as well.
Right, and the old saying that even a broken clock is right twice a day. I think Token Tony actually hit it when he said that the non-exclusive tag is the Miami hoping that somebody is dumb enough to go out there and try to sign him, because it is, for as productive as he's been on the field, you're right, he's been nothing but a headache off the field. I don't know that matters to some teams as much as it does to a team like the Patriots, where discipline and the Patriot way is everything. In Miami, that's not as big of a deal, but I think he has become such a distraction, such a pain in the ass. Ejected from the last game of the season last year in something the head coach called, stupid and embarrassing, or whatever the exact phrasing was. They clearly are not happy with this guy personality-wise, and they don't think that they can do it. Now, whether that's the head coach, Gase, thinking that he isn't strong enough to be able to control this guy, or if it's the front office saying that, or whatever it is, there's something going on there where, they like the production on the field, they don't like everything else about this guy. They're kind of hoping that they can get something in return for him.
Well, and that was my question is, okay, so this non-exclusive franchise tender, I'm hard-pressed to find a situation where a team has actually made a move on a guy and given up the 2 first-round picks. I haven't seen it. I have to get the crack research staff on something like that. But is this a situation where we see he locks him up for the $16 million, the Miami Dolphins do, but he's not in Miami a full season next year?
I could see that happening. Whether it be his off-the-field issues or maybe his performance goes down.
Because what he wanted right now as a free agent was a contract somewhere in the neighborhood of what OBJ is looking at. And we all, I think, all have the same agreement as far as receivers and their actual value to the game. As far as $18 million, it's a little bit ludicrous, or 18 plus. I think by kind of signing him at this $16 million number, they've actually kept him on the roster another year at lower than what they expected, and I think they're trying to find a trade partner within the next 6 to 10 months at this point to kind of unload Jarvis Landry from them, but still get the production from him as long as they got him.
Yeah, I think so, and I think it's like anything, like any kind of asset, right? They're looking at it as how do we get the most out of him to move him, I think, and when you start looking at kind of tangle partners and who's going to trade with. I'm reading up here, and it seems like Baltimore. I mean, when was the last time Baltimore was relevant? Forgetting Miami stays relevant by being irrelevant. And
okay, that's an interesting way to put it.
I think the Ravens. You look at a team like that, and they're on the cusp. They're this, they're that. They're still a solid team.
How many more receivers can they put in that fucking offense?
Right.
Well, that's the thing, right? At what point does Joe Flacco kind of pack it up and be like, hey, we're not winning anymore? It's kind of like
Flacco got his long deal, man. He is locked into the Ravens for life. The problem is you're right. You put Jeremy Maclin in there. You put Mike Wallace in there. You got Brashad Perryman in there. And now you may be able to Jarvis. How much money do you need to lock in receivers? I mean,
it's about 50%.
At what point is Baltimore going to address the running back situation?
Yeah. I hear Ray Rice is still available.
He is. He's still looking. He's got a puncher's chance. Yeah.
If anybody's dumb enough to trade for Jarvis, I'm going to say it's the Chicago Bears.
Is that only because you're a fan of Detroit and you want to just shit on a division rival?
No. Their move during the NFL draft last year to move up one pick and give up so much for that. And they do need a wide receiver, so I see them being stupid enough to be in the fishing reel of it.
What about Dallas as a replacement for Dez if he walks?
Yeah, they don't seem to have a problem bringing in guys with low character. I mean,
right.
Yeah, that's true.
I think if they're able to do a long-term deal, I think Arizona, to kind of replace Fitzgerald, this would be a good guy to do it.
Oh, well.
Especially if they could get a quarterback to match up with him.
I mean, production-wise, maybe, but they are night and day difference personality-wise.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not talking about from an off-the-field standpoint. He's not a humanitarian.
Oh, yeah,
he's not winning any humanitarian.
I understand that, but is Arizona going to put up with that kind of shit?
It's only one way to find out. I mean, who knows what they put up with? Anquan Bolden kind of whined his way out of Arizona. So, there's not a lot of Larry Fitzgeralds in the league. I don't want to say he's a minority, because that's not the right word. Because he definitely is.
Wow, if we had any sponsors, we just lost them.
He's kind of like a diamond rough kind of.
He's one of the general good guys who you just never see any kind of dirt on his name. You'd hard pressed to find a bad thing about him, Larry Fitzgerald, and That's not a lot of the guys in the NFL.
I mean, he has a commercial where he's doing like Foursquare or whatever it is with the little girl on the sidewalk, right? I mean, you have to be a pretty good Samaritan when they're like, hey, you'd fit in playing hopscotch with this little white girl. Like, we're going to trust you in a suburban white neighborhood with this little white girl. You're a good guy. And
now our sponsors are gone.
Well, what was left of them are now officially gone.
But, I mean, the initial sticker price of $16 million sounds crazy, but I think Miami actually might be making a halfway decent move in an attempt to grab. What does a guy like this go for on the open market as far as pay? Obviously, nobody does player for player deals anymore in the NFL. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
But I mean, what do you think you can realistically? Obviously, they're throwing out a dream scenario where somebody would actually go after his non-exclusive franchise tender. Let's call that what it is. That's not going to happen. Nobody's going to go after that. But I mean, does he fetch a second-round pick? Does he fetch a couple of thirds?
Well, I mean, Garoppolo got a second. What did Jimmy Graham go for? Does anyone remember?
He went for like a first and a player, didn't he? To Seattle?
Yeah.
He went for the center, Unger, and I want to say he went for a first.
Unger and a first?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was...
That's a big move by NFL standards.
Right.
So.
Well, I mean, but that was also because supposedly Jimmy Graham was sleeping with another player's wife, so they had to get him out of town. They didn't have a choice.
Yeah, the Saints gave up Graham and a fourth-round pick.
Fourth, okay.
And Seahawks gave up a first-round pick and center Max Unger.
Okay, so they did. So Unger and a first went to New Orleans for Jimmy Graham.
And a fourth round,
yeah, in the fourth round.
Yeah.
Well, I'm reading this article here in the Miami Herald, and it says that at the team store in Davie, Florida, the Landry T-shirt has been marked down from $34.99 to $15. So I think we've got a little strong indicator.
Yeah.
You just sign the guy to a franchise tender of $16 million, and then you discount his stuff 75%. So I think they're trying to unload him out of the aqua and orange over there in Miami. But be interesting. You talking about Miami being relevant by staying irrelevant. There's a guy who a lot of players or a lot of scouts and executives think should move to wide receiver. Maybe we could see him in Miami, and that's Lamar Jackson. He makes for an interesting, obviously, talking point because there's a lot of people on the radio. I don't want to go down that road again, but there's a lot of people on one side who believe he should get a chance at quarterback because all the white quarterbacks get a chance at quarterback, and there's a lot of people who believe he's just straight wide receiver at this point. I hear a lot of Rob Parker and Stephen A. Smith, which I actually agree with them. I think he does have the tools to be a quarterback in this league. If Tyrod Taylor can be a quarterback, I think this guy can be a quarterback.
That's such a strange way of putting it, but I think you're right. Is that I guess the question is, what does he want to do? Because that's the one thing that I haven't actually heard.
Yeah, I haven't heard him come out and say, I want to play football, however that is.
Right.
Or I want to play quarterback.
Well, I mean, is this going to be like another Tim Tebow situation where teams are like, yeah, we'll sign you as like a tight end or a fullback or something, but not as a quarterback?
Yeah.
And he said, no, I want to play quarterback, and now he's out of the league.
Well, you got to figure at this point, he still believes generally that he's got a shot at playing quarterback. Because he's coming out into the combine as a quarterback prospect. It would have to take a huge, overwhelming advisory council for, his agent, scouts, executives to say, look, quarterback's just not going to work out for you. And I don't think that's happened yet because I think the only people we're hearing from are people on the radio or people on the TV. Bill Polian's been the big activist to move him over to wide receiver. We haven't heard anything from people who actually are going to be making these selections.
No, that's true too, but I love that. I love that Tim Tebow comes up right when we make this comparison.
Well, he's always going to come up for the rest of the time.
And absolutely, and I just want to mention for the record, I think now we've solidified that the sponsors are all gone. And,
people have all turned off the radio. It's just us four now. No one's listening.
But anyway, I love that we can do this where we can just arbitrarily decide, hey, you know what? I have no merit or reason for people to believe I could play a certain position, but let's just go with it and see. And I think, if he wants to play wide receiver, like, bless his heart, I mean, I'd like to show up to the NFL and say, yeah, cool, like, I'm better than carrying the water. Like, I can do this too.
Right.
You know?
I don't think that's the case. I don't know much about Lamar Jackson. You don't hear. He's not a big guy who was chirping a lot. He doesn't, talk a lot. We don't know what he wants, and I think that you nailed it on the head. We don't know what he wants to do. Does he want to play in the NFL by any means necessary? Then yes, okay, maybe he can transition to wide receiver after he gets drafted in the 6th round or whatever. But he's got to go to the combine as a quarterback, right?
I would say so. Yes. Maybe he could fit in my crazy offensive scheme.
The 2 quarterback scheme where you pray for the
he
best.
would make more sense in your dumb scheme.
Yeah, like put him and Deshaun Watson together.
Ooh.
That would be fucking scary.
That would be-
actually.
That would be
Now
pretty
you
interesting.
might be onto something.
Yeah, that would be an interesting one to watch because they're dual threats. You have your running game and your passing game loaded up in 2 guys.
Yeah.
See, now you're kind of on to something.
Yeah. The rust is coming off the gears a little.
Yeah, he backdoored his way into being right on that one. But yeah, well,
Hey, using one of my favorite words.
We'll give it to him.
Backdoor.
Okay. We should have locked the door after you came in.
Yeah, you're probably right.
But you got a guy who's got a hell of an arm. I think all of his intangibles mirror Jameis Winston, and he can run the football. I don't understand why this guy... He may not be the first overall pick in the draft, but I think I watched a lot of him, in college, and I think he's got the intangibles to be as good as Jameis Winston or Tyrod Taylor. And I don't want to compare him just specifically to black quarterbacks, but I think he's got the ability to... He's got the ability to play better than Blake Bortles does, and I like Blake Bortles.
Oh yeah, well, and it's you got to look at what the quarterback situation is in specific teams. Like he's better than anything in Cleveland right now. He's better than anything in Chicago. I think I'm not sold on Trubisky at all.
Well, it's year 2.
Yeah, but
you got to look around that at that point. We haven't. You haven't sold on Trubisky, but we played 7 games.
Whatever. Garoppolo's played 6, or he played 6 before he went to San Francisco. He was the fucking.
I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but apparently he played in a lot better system than Mitch Trubisky is running around in right now.
But he's better than anything on the Jets. I think he might be better than anything they have on the Chargers because fucking Phillip Rivers is about 20 years past his prime. So there are a bunch of teams where Lamar Jackson as a quarterback is a better viable option than anything they have now. And I think that, if he wants to play in this league as a quarterback, then he should be probably stubborn about it. Now, whether, he might just say, screw it, I want to play by any means necessary, in which case, go ahead, do whatever you need to do. But
I would imagine there's one out of the 32 teams that's going to look at him as a quarterback and accept whatever they get out of him and actually put them on the roster.
Yeah.
Now, what round that is, I don't know if Lamar really cares. I think he just wants a chance to play quarterback. I'm speaking for him, obviously, in this part. I don't know exactly what his mind is. I could see if in 2-3 years, let's just hypothetically say he goes to the Jets, and in 2-3 years he hasn't gotten on the field. The Jets coaching staff determines he hasn't been, good enough as a quarterback. I could see him saying, all right, I'd like to stick around, so I'll play receiver. Or can you see him maybe sitting around 1 or 2 years trying to learn both? Learn the quarterback offense, learn the routes, learn how to be a receiver? Or is that just too much to put on a plate of a guy who's 22 years old at that point?
And it might be a little too much to put on his plate, but, if that's what it takes for him to stay in the NFL, maybe this is the kick in the ass that he needs to go from being a young college graduate to I hate saying it this way, but go from being a boy to being a man. If that's what it takes, then, if it takes working 20 hours a day, then you fucking work 20 hours a day and you get on it.
No, I just want to be clear on this guy. Like, this isn't a guy who's projected to go, like, a top 5 pick, right? Like, this is one of those depth kind of value picks that he could turn out to be.
Well, there's some guys who believe he's better than the guys projected to go top 5. And then there's guys who think, obviously, he should be a receiver. So.
Right. So, let's take that different road that he's kind of a value pick. Where you're like, okay, you know what? There's some value to this guy. Get him in the system. So as you said, there are a lot of teams out there where they're like, you know what? With some development and whatnot, it's exactly right. You look at the Chargers and Phillip Rivers. You're like, he couldn't get it done in his prime. The guy is so far out of his prime. Is this guy any worse?
Right.
And he's what? 15 years younger than Philip Rivers, like,
and a lot cheaper too.
you know, and so I think when you look at it from that point of view, and there's a certain value to having him in the system, learning it, you're like, well, wait a second, like there could be some real potential here. Do we even need to have him learning 2 positions?
Well, and you're not wrong in that sense, but if he doesn't mold himself as a quarterback in the first 2 years, by having him learn 2 positions, you don't have to restart him. Yeah. Okay, 2 years hasn't worked. You got a 4-year rookie deal. We got to now take the next 2 years to make you into a wide receiver. Probably making somebody into a wide receiver is not going to take as long as making somebody into a quarterback. But the problem is how long, if you draft this guy, again, if we're expecting him to go 4th, 5th, 6th round, your expectations for him don't start until year 2 or 3 or 4. So you're okay with having a plan for him. But, there's guys now in the top 5, Darnold, Allen, where it's not a plan. They can just come in, learn the offense, and be quarterbacks. There's a lot of people that don't believe that Lamar Jackson can do that. I'd hate to wonder if that's a testament to he's just not smart enough, or is this a race issue at this point?
That's a good point. Now, the idea is that I don't know. I was never an elite football player. I think
anybody looking in the studio is an elite football player.
So I don't know how easy it is to master 2 NFL positions kind of simultaneously. So,
I gotta imagine it's not easy.
So I think when we start looking at, okay, by year 2, year 3, all right, he's a value pick, sure, let's have him going 2 things. I don't know at that point. It's like, well, are we expecting kind of mediocrity out of him the whole way through at that point? Or are we expecting, hey, if we put a bunch of stuff at him, something sticks, and let's just find out which one of the 2 sticks more? Like, if we throw a whole bunch of wide receiver stuff at him, does he become a decent enough kind of top-ish in wide receiver? Or if we throw enough quarterback stuff at him and, he has to come in relief one day because both guys end up getting, breaking their collarbones, hey, wait a second, he picked up enough at quarterback that now he's playing.
And the question is, obviously there are guys far smarter than us who sit around and look at these, but they're going to miss on just as many prospects. You got a guy like Mel Kiper. He literally analyzes every single player in the draft and some that don't even get drafted. You're going to miss on some of them. And you know what? Some of the more high-profile guys are the ones where you make your career out of. If, case in point, Brandon Weeden. John Gruden loved that guy, and clearly that did not work out. You're going to miss on guys. It's all about execution on the field. Lamar Jackson, I look at him. He's 6'3", 212. He reminds me of a Ben Roethlisberger. Look at that height and that weight. He's huge. Now, the question I have is, have scouts and GMs and all these guys for these franchises, are they going in there talking to Petrino and his offensive coordinator at Louisville and saying, did this guy know the playbook, or did he just wing it? Because a lot of that mentality, why he may be falling down, has nothing to do with a race issue or the fact, can he play quarterback or receiver? But did he even? Manziel. They admitted to Manziel after he was out of the league at Texas A&M. He didn't know half the playbook. He improvised half the playbook. He didn't know where his receivers were going. He admitted it. He didn't know where his receivers were going. He didn't know who was running what. He improvised, and I think that eventually affected him in the NFL. I think GMs and scouts are looking at, hey, let's not make these mistakes again, because quarterback is obviously the most scrutinized position. John Elway's got it wrong ever since he's been a GM. That's clear and evident. Other than Peyton Manning, he's not been able to secure a quarterback, and he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So it's not the easiest position to analyze, and that's why I always say every single draft you should get a quarterback. One of them's got to stick, right?
That's certainly an interesting way of looking at it, but it's just one of those things where it can't just be any quarterback and that you hope that you get it right eventually.
Well, no, you're going to analyze quarterbacks coming out of every single draft, and the one that you think you can get here, if you believe in the third round you can get a guy in the third round. How often Tom Brady's been around for 18 years, but that's not the norm. That's not the standard, the gold standard. That's what you want. You want a guy to be around for 18, 19 years. That's why you're drafting these people. But clearly, I would say the average shelf life, and I don't have any data on this, but the average shelf life of a quarterback, an average quarterback's 3 to 6, maybe.
Yeah, that sounds
at the most.
And that that line of reasoning that you have is why the Redskins took both RG3 and Kirk Cousins in the same draft.
Yeah,
They assumed that one of them would stick around. I don't think they figured it would be Cousins.
I don't think anybody figured that, but I mean, like you said, the book finally got out, and that's the problem I think a lot of these guys are weary about is RG3, Donovan McNabb, the list goes on of these guys who their first instinct is to just take off. Eventually, guys in the NFL are just as fast as you are. Guys in college, you could get around, you could dance around, you could make yourself look good. Vince Young is another one that comes to mind. They catch up to you in the NFL, and they hit you hard. And I mean, Donovan McNabb had a long career, but was he ever really great? No. RG3 clearly is done. These guys who run, I mean, Russell Wilson at some point, without that offensive line, he's going to get killed too. I mean, eventually these guys who just scamper around. Russell is a little bit of an anomaly as he has the ability to still throw accurate, deep 60-yard passes on the run, which is amazing to me. But a lot of these guys can't do that. And I saw enough of Lamar Jackson that under duress, he instantly thinks to running and doesn't look down the field. So that's something that he's going to have to learn if he wants to play quarterback and be a running quarterback.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem is that defenses have figured out the running quarterback in the NFL. They still haven't quite done that in college, or they just, like you said, they can't catch up to them. So it's going to take, I don't wish this upon anybody, but it's going to take blowing his ACL for him to figure out, I can't run every single play because they're going to catch up to me.
I'm sure a team's not hoping that that's when he's going to learn when he's sitting on the shelf for 8 to 12 months.
No, but that's usually what it takes is some kind of serious injury that he gets from running around.
So let's flip it to the social aspect of this is everybody who I read on these sports sites is he's not getting the fair shake because he's black. I mean, is there something to that, do you think? Do you think there's some secret?
I mean, you got to ask the only black guy in the room.
I'll ask Token here, Token Tony. I mean, we can go down the line. Julian Edelman never got a shot at quarterback.
Yeah.
Eric Crouch never got a shot at quarterback. There's guys on the other side that never got a shot at quarterback. They told you got to move immediately to receiver.
Yeah.
Matt, what was his name? The big cokehead in Jacksonville. Remember him?
No.
Oh, what was his name? He ended up having like a huge cocaine problem. You know who I'm talking about. Anyways, I'll have to get the research staff
Bill
looked up.
Blanken.
Anyways, point being, no, it's like a regular name. I think it's. I'm gonna look it up now. Hold on.
All right.
Matt, cocaine problem. Jacksonville wide receiver. He was a wide receiver for Jacksonville. I think his name was like Matt Jones. Matt Jones, yeah, Matt Jones. You don't remember him?
No.
Oh, okay. Anyways, he played quarterback at Arkansas, and he was like the big thing out of Arkansas. He was like third in the Heisman voting or whatever. And then they told him he'll never be a quarterback. So I mean, it's not like it hasn't happened on the other side.
Right, but
are we just making this into an issue because that's what we do nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, I'll let Token.
That's just up for anybody. I'm looking at you when I say it. But
no. Go ahead.
Yeah, in my mind, I think
you're prettier than the door. I don't like looking at the door. So. Not much, but slightly. Sorry, go ahead, Token.
Yeah, in my mind, they still think of them as the minorities that I guess they think they are, so. I mean, there's
why'd you direct it to him?
Swing and a miss.
So sponsors in the future are now gone as well.
So can you repeat that? Because I want to make sure I got that right. I guess they think they're the minorities that they think they are?
Yeah.
Is that like the Dennis Green, like, Cliff Notes version? They are who we thought they are?
Kind of around those lines. In my mind, they're not going to give them a shot because...
The question I have is, are we even talking about this as well, I mean, I guess this is the same situation 3 years ago with Johnny Manziel. A lot of people didn't believe that he was a first-round talent, believed he was going to be somewhere around the same avenue as Lamar Jackson. Now, what if Lamar Jackson goes high second, late first? What if New England takes him at 31? Is that still too high for everyone's necessities? Because there's people that believe that Lamar Jackson should be the first pick in the draft. I personally think that's ludicrous.
I agree with that. I would lean more towards like maybe mid third, early fourth, or something around there is projected talent level with.
But you know what? On the flip side, I mean, if he goes mid third, high second, early fourth, if he goes any of those spots, day 2, day 3, and ends up being a really good quarterback, isn't that more of a vindication for somebody who's who's on the side of he's being shunned for reason A, B, or C, whatever reason you want to go with? Isn't that more of a vindication? Or because that's the way I see it. I see it if he goes down like I hate to keep using Brady, but if Brady went in the 6th round and he has used that chip on his shoulder for 20 years to continue to dominate the competition, and even 20 years later, or 18 years later, with 5 Super Bowl rings, 8 appearances, he still goes out there every day trying to kick your teeth in. Like he's the guy who was scorned. So I don't see him going 3rd or 4th round as a huge issue if he's still going to go in as a quarterback. I think the issue now is does he get the chance to play quarterback?
Well, I think that's it too. Is who takes him? So let's say, all right, let's go down that road of second, day 2, day 3, and he uses that as kind of motivation, right? At what point do you get the chance to use that motivation? It's fine to say, okay, yeah, I'm the hardworking guy on the field. I work out in the weight room and all of that, and I put in all the time to learn the plays. At what point are you able to kind of step in and have that run? Now, is he going to get 18 years like Brady did?
Odds are he's not.
So when he gets his, as you said, kind of 3 to 6 years, when does that come? And at that point, is it still kind of worth anything, right? When you look at these value kind of 2nd and 3rd day picks in any sport,
right?
It becomes okay. Well, we're hoping they turn out, so let's hope they turn out, and then are they even on the field?
I feel like looking at the draft, and if you look at previous drafts, you're really hoping that exact mantra for all these teams probably starts around pick 21, whenever the playoff teams start. The top 20 guys, all the prospects that you see there, are the ones who are expected to be, superstars.
Roster.
Other than that, once you start with the playoff teams in the 1st round, I think you're just throwing darts at that point. You're making the best educated decision for your team based on your needs and your future. But, without those, even those surefire home runs in the top 20 aren't, how many busts have we seen?
Yeah.
Many.
And how many of those actually start day 1 compared to...
Well, the first 20 are more than likely going to start day 1, but a lot of the guys that New England's drafted in the in the high 20s, early 30s. DeMarcus Easley, what was that guy's name? You remember him? Easley was gone.
Yep.
Malcolm Brown's a guy who's contributing right now, but he's not a superstar. He was drafted, I think, 31st out of Texas. That's a team who consistently drafts up in that area where most of the teams, I would say the other 31 teams have all been in the top 10, 15 picks over the last decade, at least once.
Yeah.
Does Lamar Jackson make more sense? You were talking about Cleveland. Obviously, their situation is a dumpster fire, the Jets, etc. But does he make more sense going to a situation that wants him to play quarterback but does not need him to play quarterback right away?
And I was just thinking about that. It probably makes sense for him not just to be a backup, but to be a backup to the right person, somebody that throws first but still has the ability to run. And the more I think about it, the more Washington makes sense. Because Alex Smith is an underrated runner,
Absolutely.
But he's a thrower first.
Mm-hmm.
And if Lamar Jackson can learn from him the times that he should run versus the times that he should throw, then that would be a person that I'd want to learn from.
And he's a guy who specifically, Alex Smith, has 3 years left, maybe 4. He's, 34 years old at this point, so...
Yeah, he's got to be.
I think he's right around that area.
Crack research staff, on it. Alex Smith age, go.
As long as your battery's up to speed. Or even...
33.
I hear typing, 33.
So he's 33, so 3-4 more years.
Before the start of the season.
All right.
He's not young. I think that's the perspective.
I think the problem is if we send him over to Cleveland, or if you send him... it's the same with Deshaun Kaiser. We're already ready to get rid of Deshaun Kaiser. He's just in a bad scheme.
Yeah, and
he's not a bad quarterback. He's just in a bad scheme.
Right, and that's the other side of it with Lamar Jackson is, if you put him behind somebody like a Tom Brady or an Aaron Rodgers, where they're true pocket passers, that's not the right system for him. If you put him just in the offense exists, and then you try to make Lamar Jackson run it, that's probably not the wisest thing to do, because you don't know if he's going to be able to adapt his game in a short period of time to an offense that he's not necessarily familiar with. So, being behind somebody like an Alex Smith or Russell Wilson, that's, those are other similar type schemes that he would fit in well with. God, that was terrible grammar. But with which he would fit in well. Where
Is that much better? Like, I just want to...
That one is correct.
You feel good about that?
Yes, I do.
Final answer.
Somebody needs to learn fucking something on this show, because God knows they're not learning anything about sports by listening to us.
So there you go. So today we've established grammar, both incorrect and correct,
Yes.
which I'm a fan
We
of.
could start talking about punters again.
You know, it's funny. You actually mentioned Washington, who didn't immediately come to mind. Seattle obviously did, because Russell Wilson's like the prototypical mold. But actually, when you the team I had in mind was kind of like the same as you had in mind, was actually New Orleans. Breeze has got 2, 3 maybe good years left, and he is the same kind of guy. He's a sneaky runner who has a fantastic arm. I think Lamar Jackson could learn a lot from a guy like Drew Brees. And I think you're right. Going first round, to Cleveland, while everybody was up and on, he should be a first round pick. Maybe that's not the right scenario. The right scenario maybe is going 4th round, sitting behind Breeze or Alex Smith or Russell Wilson. And if he goes up to Seattle, he has a chance to play in preseasons and get himself on a stage to eventually, when he's ready to play, if Russell's not there, then he steps in. If Russell's still there, then he becomes a piece that people covet.
Right, and it's not just about going to the right scheme and having a quarterback that's similar to him in front of him. That other quarterback has to be a mentor to him.
Yeah.
Because he can't go to like a Tampa Bay and hope that Jameis Winston all of a sudden is cool with teaching this guy how to
No, he's
play
too
quarterback.
young. He's too young.
Or like the same thing with a Teddy Bridgewater. You're going to end up with a situation like a Peyton Manning where he refused to mentor backup quarterbacks because he didn't want that guy taking his spotlight.
Well, and that's the same with Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre. Brett Favre had no interest in mentoring him either.
And you can make a very strong argument that Aaron Rodgers lost prime years.
Oh, yeah.
Because of Brett Favre's lack of mentorship. And I think that's a huge point, too, right? Is when you bring in kind of a future quarterback or anything, is to the guy who's in the job now, it's kind of that reality check of, wait a second, the clock's now on the other side here. Like, we're doing the countdown the other way. And
The only person who's really been able to buck that is Brady.
Yeah.
They've drafted Mallet, Garoppolo. Hoyer's been there for a time, and he's still kicking. I mean, he's not let anybody take his job other than suspension.
Yep.
And 1 year of Matt Castle. But
And five Super Bowls later.
I'm just saying, you're right. He's the only guy who really, just keeps going about his business. There's not a lot of guys when you bring in. I mean, I'm sure that when they brought in Pat Mahomes, Alex Smith obviously saw the writing on the wall, still performed at a high level, and is still gone. When they bring in that guy, they're ready to kind of show you your mortality with that franchise.
Yeah, and I think that's a big point. I think it's like, as we talked about, right, with this guy and any quarterback, is it's making those adjustments, right? Brady is a great example, and I know everybody, Brady's a great guy to talk about because of those adjustments he made, right? It's well documented, the adjustments he made off the field, work ethic wise, diet wise, all of that, lifestyle adjustments to stay relevant.
Right.
He's relevant by being relevant. He's made himself kind of that guy. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at a guy like Peyton Manning, it's true, right? There was always a lot of insecurities there. People looked at Peyton and, from minute one, it's, does he have the arm to really be that guy? Can he get that deep pass? Aaron Rodgers is a guy. Does he have the mobility? Does he, and now he's proven to be a little bit fragile these last few years.
Well, those guys were put on display from day one. I mean,
Yeah.
Peyton Manning, from the time he was a baby, was the next thing because of who Archie was.
Yeah.
And Aaron Rodgers was the guy who slipped in the draft and then sat behind Brett Favre for 3 years. So the minute he was ready to start, the good thing about this is, we all probably believe he's more closer to day 2 pick than day 1 pick. I think he makes himself relevant by working hard and becoming something that people covet. And another interesting situation to me, and we'll kind of segue into this, is Jacksonville just signed Blake Bortles to a 3-year deal, $54 million, $18 million, obviously on average annual value, which sounds, initially like, it straddles the fence. Some people are like, this is a great deal because $18 million for a quarterback is a good value at this day and age of quarterbacks. On the other hand, people are like, Blake Bortles, what the fuck? Who are you doing? But this is a scenario where you bring in a guy in the whatever round you want to draft him in, like Lamar Jackson, and you say, look, here we go. I'm not completely 100% sold on the Blake Bortles experience. So, Blake, you got let's call it, you got a year and a half to get better, or we're going to try this. So I think that's another really good spot, because even though Blake Bortles they've taken Jacksonville out of the free agent market, I don't think that means they've taken him out of the draft market. And I think Lamar Jackson might make a lot of sense, especially with the window they have with that defense. That defense is very good. That window may not be around for a long time. They've got to figure out what they're going to do in that spot. Now you're just chomping at the bit.
I was waiting for Token again because I was pulling up another quarterback that may be a good mentor to our buddy Lamar Jackson here.
He was digging deep. But I think in my mind, he's kind of too young at this point.
Andrew Luck?
No.
Oh, God. Oh,
I was thinking about him.
Wow. I hadn't actually considered him.
And Andrew Luck is not that young anymore. Like,
That's
lest we forget, Andrew Luck's kind of on that kind of bubble now of being like, has he run his course?
Yeah.
He came in, he had a couple of good years, but at the end of the day with Andrew Luck, I mean, this is a guy that's gone 0-4 in seasons to start the year.
Well, he's 28 years old at this point right now. He'll be 29
but he's had
when the season starts. Well, he's obviously got a huge arm injury. So you're right. Does Indianapolis have to look at, what happens if Andrew Luck comes back and there's just nothing there? The Chad Pennington.
Well, let's see what Josh McDaniels does in the draft. Oh, wait.
No, I think Andrew Luck's a good one because this was the guy that they brought in to replace Peyton when Peyton broke the neck.
Right.
Peyton, hadn't they just been to the Super Bowl with Peyton before he broke the neck? And you bring in this guy to replace Peyton. I mean, it was within a couple of years. They had that New Orleans loss, right? So they lost to New Orleans, and the year that he broke his neck was the year that they were hosting the Super Bowl and had high expectations of making it there. Everything was looking that way. They bring in Luck. They're like, okay, Peyton, see ya. And at the time, Peyton was the guy. Like, he had the numbers, he had the records, he had everything. And people, and you bring in Luck, and what has he done? He has one playoff win?
Well, I mean,
and
it's hard to analyze
now, right? And he's hurt.
It's hard to analyze that, especially when you're in the AFC as far as playoff wins, because unfortunately you got to go through New England every single year. So,
or something like the Pittsburgh experiment or something.
Yeah, but the point being is that when he is healthy, Andrew Luck is a top-tier quarterback. The question is now, I think he's got 18 months to 2 years the Colts are going to give him before they say it's time to move on. I mean, it's a business, but they've got so much money tied up in Andrew Luck, they got to see what he can still do. Because, I mean, if he's healthy, if he can come back for 2018, he's better than, 80% of the league. So it's a kind of an interesting scenario. Do they take a flyer on a guy like this to see if Andrew Luck doesn't pan out? Because let's be honest, Jacoby Brissett's not the heir apparent over there.
What?
Yeah, I'm sorry to burst your bubble.
Oh, no! Jacoby!
We'll give him a second to deal with that, but yeah, no. I can't imagine that he may be the stopgap, but they're not obviously going quarterback this year. They're probably not going quarterback next year, but there may be a chance that if Andrew Luck doesn't pan out, Frank Reich's not going to have a long time to get his guy.
Once you go quarterback, you never go black. I don't know how that's.
Once you go black quarterback, you never go back. And there's the last sponsor.
Yeah,
there's the rest of them.
Switch is off now.
Okay, so since you had this daunting this one quarterback you're chomping at the bit, please, by all means. You had this guy you wanted to tell us all about.
I promise you I was going to let Token take this one because
it's all you, Spike.
Is it Scam Newton?
No, that's not a terrible idea. Although,
for the love of God, just say it.
Matt Stafford.
Oh, and yes, this is where Tony picks up.
Oh, it's like my idea of thinking, but it wasn't for me.
Well, I can preface this before you start your argument that he never should have been signed in the first place. Okay, go ahead.
Yes. But, if you look at his actual rushing stats, he's put up decent. I mean, he's not a running quarterback, but he's put up enough that we know he can move. And this is the type of quarterback, again, that needs to train Lamar Jackson when to throw and when to run. And this is another guy that could do it, and a guy who has had success as a quarterback in the NFL.
Success?
Well, personal success.
Oh,
Yeah, you can't sit there and say Stafford's had success, but Luck hasn't. So let's make that clear.
And remember, we'll always fall back on the fact that all roads go through New England. So
Right, but I'm just saying he's making a case that Stafford's had success.
It was better
You're
than
making
Luck.
a case that Luck is not, and those. So,
Personal statistical success.
fair
But
enough.
actually-
I will.
So is
agree
Phillip
with that.
Rivers. Statistical success.
Not recently.
No, it's true. So, well, let's talk about Bortles then. Obviously, the extension. We talked about, potentially. I think that I think they should go get a quarterback and kind of light a fire under his ass. But $18 million seems like a bargain these day and age, especially, for a quarterback who, hopefully, he becomes more of a quarterback winner than a game manager. But what do we make of this deal? Because everyone thought Jacksonville was in the market for either Alex Smith or Kirk Cousins, and now it looks like they're probably not going to go for either.
No, I think they got Bortles at a very good bargain. At probably average starting quarterback price is probably 21 to 25 mil, and they got him for 18. And he's I would say average about 15th in the league overall stats wise and success and all that.
Yeah, he's probably an average quarterback, and he's only going to get better. The problem is that, like I said before, when we were talking about Lamar Jackson, is Jacksonville's defensive window is now.
Yeah.
Is he going to get better fast enough? I mean, it's the Andrew Luck story. He hits the stopgap in New England, but New England's not going to be there forever. I mean, does he have a chance to take this team to the Super Bowl next year? Because Mariota's going to get a year better, Deshaun Watson's coming back, and Andrew Luck's potentially coming back as well. So the AFC South, if they're all healthy, just got a whole lot better than it was last year.
Yeah, it looks like one of the best quarterback divisions in all of football.
From top to bottom, yes.
Yeah.
I would agree with you on that. So, Sonny, what do you make of the Blake Bortles signing in your opinion? I mean, a lot of people, he's a very polarizing figure in this league.
I think you put it right. A deal's a deal if it actually is a deal. To kind of go back to that saying you had earlier, Spike, with the it was Tony with the he is what they expected him to be or whatever it was.
Those damn minorities.
That's a very valid point. Is an average quarterback who, again, the window for quarterbacks is so small.
Right.
Is it actually even a deal if he can't get you to the show within that tightened window?
And that's the question. It's kind of almost like it's a weird analogy to think, but I'm sure we've all been to the dollar store in our life, right?
Yep.
Yeah. You see something on the shelf and you're like, oh, it's only $1. It's a great deal, but then you get home and the fucking thing doesn't work.
Or you didn't need it.
Or you didn't need it, or it's a waste of money. But you could have just.
Out of the package.
Well, I'm just saying. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head.
But no, you're right.
You bought something at a deal and it doesn't work when you should have just spent the money on
the better guy,
the better object or the better thing on the shelf. So, okay, yes, Blake Bortles is a deal, but if he can't get you, like you said, to the show, was it more worth it to spend the money on the Kirk Cousins, the flashy Lamborghini, because he ended up being worth it?
Well, and that's the thing, right? Because, as you said, their defensive window is a couple of years. Then they, again, are rebuilding and what? So now you have a quarterback that's matured to being the guy after the show's over.
Mm-hmm.
Every team has their show. And, spending $18 million on a deal quarterback can cost you the whole thing.
Right. I think Kansas City's also proved that, too, because Alex Smith has been kind of that deal quarterback as well, and he hasn't really officially been able to get them over the hump. It's hard to say.
It's hard in the AFC.
Yeah.
It's really hard in the AFC. I mean, how many teams have represented the AFC in the last, 10 years? I mean, that weren't quarterbacked.
In the Super Bowl?
Yeah, that weren't quarterbacked by Brady or Manning.
One, Flacco.
Yeah.
And maybe Roethlisberger in 2010.
Yeah. Right?
Okay.
And you look at the NFC.
Because we did that in one of our things. It was in the last 15 years. It's Brady Manning, Roethlisberger, and Flacco in every Super Bowl.
Yeah. You know what I mean? So the AFC, it's a hard measure when you look at that. I mean, it's the same guys. And as I said, yeah, it might not be the same teams, but name a team not quarterbacked by the following, and
Right.
you can't name one. I mean, Brady hasn't had to beat the same quarterback twice in his Super Bowl victories. I mean, he has 5 Super Bowl victories, and he's beaten 5 different quarterbacks. I mean, he lost to Eli twice, but we're not talking about that. You know, how many
Spike's
different...
just coming down from that.
Right? Roethlisberger has been to, 4 Super Bowls? Or 3 Super Bowls. He won 2. So
Yeah,
3. 3 against 3 different quarterbacks.
Right. The NFC has always had more of the parity at the top, like you're saying.
You know what I mean? And I think it's a huge thing in the AFC. If you think you have a window to be that team or be in the show, is a deal worth it?
Well, that's the question.
Yeah, I don't think it is. I don't think it is.
I
I think these are those times when you look back and you're like, it's worth spending the money. How many people look back, as you said, the Lamborghini, right? How many people look back on it like, fuck it, I had the money, I should have just gotten the Lambo. You know, instead they're like, you know what, though, I wanted to, I thought I'd go budget and get the Civic. You know, and I think that's kind of the thing. No offense to anybody who drives either one, but, it's that idea. Where are they going to spend that difference? So let's say the average quarterback costs $23 million, so you're saving $5 million. Where do you put that $5 million that makes up the difference in 3 years?
In Jacksonville, at this point, I think you got to put it in your receiving core.
That's what I'm asking. I think they kind of messed up here.
I think when you started your argument, you thought it was a great deal for Jacksonville, and I think when you ended your argument, you thought it was bad.
I talked
yourself out of that.
I managed to talk myself 180 on that one. Yeah.
When you started that argument, you were like Blake Bortles, and then you were like Blake Bortles. So
I pokered myself out of that one. I Phil Ivied it. I talked myself into the fold.
But I mean, he's right. Okay, so if you're going with Blake Bortles now, you're saving the potential. I mean, the number right here for Kirk Cousins is $30 million. That's the one I keep hearing. So you're saving the $12 million at this point. He's right. Where do you invest it if you're Jacksonville?
Like you said, wide receivers, maybe a tight end.
Because Allen Robinson's about to hit the market, and he did not play at all last year, but he is probably their best receiver. Do you make an attempt to keep him there? Do you trade for Landry? Do you go get Des Bryant to be a possession receiver? Is there any?
I mean, you got to get Bryant before Landry, right?
I don't know. Do you? Do I get the same attitude for the same price? What, 8 years? How old is? I don't know how old Des Bryant is, but at least 6 years younger. I mean, I'm saying Landry's 6 years younger.
Yeah, I was gonna say Bryant can't be.
No.
Landry.
I was kind of mid-sentence when I switched to another sentence.
Yeah.
I'm saying I get Landry for the same price, the same attitude, 6 years younger, at least 6 years younger.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you get Landry, then, like we said earlier, you can't pay that non-exclusive franchise tender.
Right, you got to trade for him.
You got to trade for him.
But if Jacksonville feels their window is now, I mean, I think Landry's probably worth a second-round pick.
It's certainly not the worst idea in the world.
They've clearly shown that they're investing in Blake Bortles for 2018.
Right, and if they're going to do that, then it can't just
The time is now.
It can't just be where else do you invest it on the team. It's how do we invest this to give Bortles weapons so we get the best out of Bortles for our $18 million investment.
And is there a way to do that, though? Like, that's what I'm kind of saying is, at what point, what weapons can you put in there for that saved money, air quotes, bring out the best in Blake Bortles to be the guy to get you to the show? I don't know if there's a formula for that.
I'm trying to look at their offensive line and see if that's where they really need to be.
That's just my concern is that...
Bring Megatron to them.
Oh.
Their offensive line only gave up 12 sacks last year, so they actually have a pretty decent offensive line. Committed a lot of penalties, but overall, I mean...
Yeah, but penalties are just discipline. You can get that with coaching. You don't need to swap guys out for that.
Right. No, you're not talking about revamping the whole line, but I mean, I'm trying to think. It's got to be the receiving core or another solid, number 2 punch with Leonard Fournette. Mm-hmm. When you bring Leonard Fournette out of the game, you don't miss a beat with player X,
LeGarrette Blount?
That could be. Could you see LeGarrette Blount and Fournette in the same backfield?
Fuck. That'd be scary.
That's power on power right there.
What about a good receiving tight end, though? I think that would fit a gap with them, too, though.
Well, sure. I mean, what's out there as far as going to be able to get that? I mean, I'm sure you could probably get Jamie Graham for peanuts nowadays.
Yeah. Is Bortles good enough yet? Still, though, like that, the question comes down to, from my point of view, is Bortles good enough at his price that we can put anybody we want in any part of the field? Is he good enough that he can still use those weapons?
Well, the question is now, we're not asking that question anymore. The problem is they've made that decision. Yeah. Apparently he is. He's good enough at $18 million to continue going forward with him. Now we have to look at the $12 million you talk about they saved. Like, Allen Robinson's gone if he decides not to resign. He had one catch for 17 yards last year, and he tore his ACL. If he's fully healthy, he can get money on the open market. Do we decide to maybe take that 12 and give 10 of it to Allen Robinson? Probably a good idea, because I'm looking at their wide receivers. Marquise Lee's halfway decent. Hearns is decent. Westbrook is decent. None of them are outstanding. But what else is out there? Like you're talking about Dez Bryant. The market for free agents for wide receivers at this moment doesn't look that needy.
Yeah, and I mean, they have all those, like you said, good to pretty good to not superstar type wide receivers already there. With Robinson, if they can get somebody like, trade for Landry, I mean, that core can be good, especially if Bortles is worth an $18 million contract, because then he should be able to make those guys look better than maybe they are, or he can get the best out of them that other people wouldn't expect. I mean, that's why we see guys like Brady and Manning and Breeze and Rodgers make stars out of wide receivers that aren't supposed to be stars. Like, why is Julian Edelman a superstar? It's not because he was a great wide receiver in college. He was a quarterback in college.
Say what?
He's a great wide receiver because he's got skills and because Brady makes him better. Can Bortles do that with these other guys?
I mean, there's not a lot of guys that, not a lot of quarterbacks in the league that can make guys into what Brady made him into, but if anybody can do it, it's Blake Bortles. Let's see. I mean, where is Jacksonville picking? Obviously, they're picking in the back of the draft. So, I mean, you're looking at the draft guys like Calvin Ridley has been talked about high on boards. Courtland Sutton is a guy out of SMU that they've been talking about. 6'4", 225. That'd be a good guy to kind of have a safety blanket for Bortles. So, I mean, wide receiver in the draft could be an interesting, decision for them. Man, we have talked about Jacksonville football for a long time here.
Yeah.
Anyways, long story short, the time will tell on the Blake Bortles value of his contract, but I think the fantastic thing is if they believe that the time is now with their great rushing and their great defense, if Blake Bortles is good enough to just kind of not fuck shit up, I think it's going to end up being a great signing. So we'll see how that all goes from there. Let's switch over to the ice, and it's been trades galore, I guess. They haven't been the flashy names with the exception of Rick Nash, but there's been a lot of movement going on. But I know the Bruins are number one in your heart. Or are you a VGK guy now, or what is it?
God, I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that. No, it's just the plan was, or my thought was going into the season that Bruins would be the number one. So I mean, the Bruins have been number one for 30 some odd years of my life.
You're old.
Shut the fuck up. Fuck! I just choked on air.
Yeah, air. That's what it was.
Yeah. What the fuck? I only had a job in college so that I could have money to go to Bruins games. Like, this is a team that I have followed, that I've loved for decades. I was there when they retired Ray Bourque's number, and I had a tear in my eye. I mean, this is the type of team, the type of commitment I had to this team. And then they fucking come, they played in Vegas, and I was cheering for Vegas. It was the strangest goddamn thing. Wearing a Bruins jersey, and I was cheering for Vegas. It's strange. So I think I might be just trapped in a prisoner of the moment type situation. But
so you're just going to root for whoever's better at the time?
Yeah, well, the
problem is they're both good right now.
The problem is they're both really fucking good. And the sick thing is going to be, in that .0001% chance that they both make the Stanley Cup Finals. Then I got to figure out what to do because taking a second mortgage on the house so I can afford tickets and flight to Boston to watch all those games out there is on the table. It's something the wife and I have already talked about doing.
You'd have to cut like a jersey in half and wear both at once.
Oh,
You better knit yourself an airplane and a hotel. I don't think.
it was clothing, not knitting. Damn it.
Okay.
Apparently, there's a difference. I don't know what the fuck it is, but I've been lectured about it enough.
One's probably with more fabric, and the other one's probably more with yarn. I'm
There
guessing.
you go. That sounds right, actually.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right.
Circle gets the square.
All right. Well, let's look at it because Boston shipped a whole lot of prospects and players here. Let's break down the first trade. Rick Nash goes to Boston, and in return, the Rangers receive Ryan Spooner, Matt Bolesky, defenseman Ryan Lindgren, Boston's first-round pick in 2018, and their seventh-round pick in 2018. You're closest to the team of anyone sitting in this room, as far as Boston goes. I mean, what do you think of this deal for both sides?
Well, Boston also made the signing of Brian Giunta. They signed him to a
Yeah, I saw that too.
1-year, one-way deal. So the best quote that I can think of is Boston is really priming itself to win the 2009 Stanley Cup.
Was it even 2009 when he was relevant?
I have no
Probably
idea.
before that,
It
too.
was
When was
about-
he on the Devils?
It was about then. I don't
Was
know.
it about then?
He was captain of the Canadiens for a while, wasn't he? Giunta, yeah.
Giunta?
Yeah.
Was he? That's some-
Captain of the Canadiens.
I believe so. Brian Giunta was captain of the Canadiens.
I don't remember him having the C, but that's
That's what made it so crazy is that he was the first American to be captain of the Canadiens.
yeah.
And then what's his name took it over? Pacioretty now.
Pacioretty, yeah.
I think it was Giunta then Pacioretty. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it went.
He is correct.
So let's look at that though. Let's talk about this. Is the two big moves that Boston made, like giving up a lot future wise to New York, a way of Boston kind of saying, hey, the time's now, today, when we look at our core and we look at our star players, and New York's way of kind of saying the time for us was yesterday.
Right.
That's kind of been, like, from my perspective, what I get back home is a lot of the talk on the TV and the news and whatever is that, New York's bracing themselves and a lot of those players are facing some tough realities. I mean, you look at Henrik Lundqvist, arguably the best goalie of this generation. The numbers don't lie. And his best
That's an arguable statement, but go ahead. Yeah.
But you know what I mean?
Yeah, no.
He's won a Vezina. He's won all the
Sure.
things. And now all of a sudden, his best chance at a cup was yesterday when they made the cup against LA. They're not getting there most likely again. And I mean, trading away a big piece like Rick Nash for future guys that aren't roster players is a big way of saying that. Boston could be looking at it saying, hey, Bergeron, Marchand, Chara,
Pasternak, DeBrusque.
yeah, Rask in net. I mean, this is our last shot. Like, we make that move. I mean, what was it a couple years ago when they traded for, what was it, Ginla and Yager?
They
traded for Yager.
They traded for Yager and they tried to get a Ginla, right?
Yeah.
I mean, they've been looking the last few years, and it makes kind of sense. People forget Marchand is he plays a grinding style. I mean, those are city miles that he's putting on his body. And, I mean, he was the same draft, wasn't he the same? No, he was a couple of years before Crosby, wasn't he? I think he was drafted before Crosby.
Rick Nash?
No, not Rick Nash. Brad Marchand was either the same year or before Crosby. He wasn't after Crosby. Bergeron wasn't. Bergeron was before Crosby as well.
Right.
So I mean, these are guys that
He
they're
was
getting up
drafted
there.
in the 2006 entry
Okay,
draft.
so he was
So
one
one
year
after.
after Crosby, but he plays a harder style of game than Crosby.
Definitely.
know?
I mean, Crosby's physicality is a little underrated, I think. I mean, Marchand plays harder.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's
but
like Crosby's a tough guy. Don't get me wrong. To play in the NHL and be a top guy, you have to be a tough guy. But I think when it comes to what they put their bodies through on a night by night basis, Marchand's playing top minutes against top big guys, and has worn himself down. And I think it's Boston's way of kind of saying, "Hey, guess what? Time could be now." And
It's like
you're,
the
as,
light at the end of the tunnel is approaching sooner than they hope.
Oh,
Well, they've got to believe that the time is now, because realistically, they can compete with everybody below them, and I think they can give Tampa Bay just as much as Tampa Bay can handle. And the way to the Eastern Conference is obviously going to be through Tampa. I think, obviously, the playoffs, anything goes. Hot goaltender, home ice. Who knows what could happen? But I think with the addition of Rick Nash, they solidified. They got, like you said, you got Backes, you got Bergeron, Marchand. On the back end, you got McAvoy. Some of your lower guys, DeBrusk. Torrey Krug, Krejci. They've got a lot of good players that can create a solid team. That the top three lines that they're going to put out in the playoffs are just as good, if not better, than anything else the East has.
And they're not young. Lest we forget, these aren't young guys.
Their
anymore.
top guys aren't young.
Yeah,
they're Marchands, Bergerons, and Charas, etc.
Aren't young, right? No, but
for as many of the young
experience,
for many of the experienced guys they do have the young guys.
That's true.
That's going to be a great mix, because DeBrusk, he's a rookie or first year. Jake DeBrusk.
And he can play.
Charlie McAvoy.
I think he had a little bit of time last year, but I think this is officially
his first full kind of year. Yeah. It's like Matt Murray thing.
Yeah, Charlie McAvoy's first cup of coffee was the last year's playoffs.
Yep.
So they've got youth, experience, they've got depth. I think the time is now. Yeah.
And even when you make a trade for a guy like a Rick Nash, right, where Rick Nash is on the downhill on his career, like Rick Nash is not the same 40-goal scorer he was in Columbus.
Correct, but he's also not going to be expected to do that.
Right? So he's now a secondary threat.
He's on the second line with Krejci and DeBrusk,
and I think right? You're bringing him in as a secondary threat because that's what he is now.
Right. Well, I'm not even sure he's that good anymore. I mean, I know that he's playing second-line type minutes, but
he's better than what Bolesky and Spooner were giving them.
Bolesky's garbage,
right?
Which is a shame, because when he was in Anaheim, I actually loved him, and I loved that signing for Boston, and he just has not lived up to that at all. But I mean, I'm looking at Nash's stats right here. In the 14-15 season, he put up 42 goals. Since then, he's put up 15, 23, and 18.
Right.
I mean, he is way, way down. Now, part of that is that the Rangers just aren't good enough, and they weren't getting him the opportunities to score. But
even back then, and also back then when he went over to New York was better too. They had a lot more weapons. He wasn't as relied on as he was in Columbus. So while his numbers took a dip because of aging, his numbers also took a dip because of him being option 1A or 1B or 1C. Not because they had San Luis for a time. They had Zuccarello. They've had Derek Brassard, Brandon Proust. They've had a lot of guys in that time who've come and been other options for goal scoring. So he hasn't always been. What's his name? Carl Hagelin was another one for a time.
I forgot about Hagelin.
Yeah, he was in New York for a little while. So he wasn't always in Columbus. He was the guy. He was the franchise savior. But in New York, he didn't have to be. So a part of that was being a different option, as well as aging. So I think looking at his stats alone, it's a little bit misleading. This year, the Rangers just aren't good. But I think that getting this guy on a second line to be able to body people and bruise. And I think it's a great trade, and I don't think – I mean, Boston's first-round pick will be late, this year. The seventh-round pick is, whatever, throwaway. But I think that what they gave up player-wise right now to make their team instantly better than it was yesterday, I think that Boston – time will tell who won the trade, but Boston got the better of the deal today, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think of all the big trades we've seen this year, I think that's the case. I mean, there's a clear winner as of right now. I think – when you look back at other big name trades, the one that jumps out to me is the tourist trade.
Yeah, that's going to be the
with
trade
Duchesne,
of the year.
right?
Yeah.
And I think that one's proven itself. I mean, Ottawa's a train wreck.
Oh yeah.
And I think they thought, and don't get me wrong, it's sad because I truly believe talent-wise and what he can do, Duchesne is a generational player.
He's way better than tourists on an average, on a face value,
right?
So.
And I think the problem is I don't know if Duchesne wants to be a generational player anymore. Like, this is a guy that is kind of become like the Alex Semin of the league.
Oh, wow.
And I hate to be so tough on the kid, but he's become a bit Alex Semin. Like when Alex Semin wanted to play, he could play. There was you watch his highlights. You watched when he played, that guy had a shot on him.
Yeah.
Like, he had almost a better wrist shot. He did have a better wrist shot than Ovechkin. He had a better shot than Ovechkin, and he could skate, he could move, he was big, he was strong, all these things. 99% of the time, He didn't want to play. And I think with Duchesne, it's starting to become that thing where he gets on the ice and it's an ice time decision. I'm good this shift. I don't need to
sit this play out.
Yeah,
sit this shift out.
Yeah, I'm good. And I think that there's a clear winner there. Turris made Nashville instantaneously better. Not that they really needed that to get that much better, but I mean he did. He was an upgrade.
It was a kick in the pants, yeah.
Yeah. And Duchesne has done nothing for Ottawa. Like Ottawa's no better having him in their lineup, but now they're talking about trading Carlson. Like this is so. I think when you look at this trade, I mean Boston today became a better team.
Right, I agree.
New York painted the road they're going on.
Sure, and they announced that a few days back that they were basically looking to reevaluate their situation in the upcoming months. The question I have is if, like you talk about, Rangers are clearly on the road to rebuild, could we see them move Lundqvist in the offseason?
I think we're more likely to see them move McDonough today or tomorrow.
Well, I agree with that. No, I'm talking about
in the offseason. I think they keep Lundqvist for as long as they can.
You don't think he's going to want to not be a part of the one thing you talked about as far as being you said that he's one of the greatest goalies of our generation. The one thing he's missing
is the cup. I mean, at what point do you even start to think, does he possibly move?
That's what I'm saying. I think at this point...
do you even move him today?
How long is he under contract for?
He's under contract for 2 more years.
Does he move today?
No, I don't think so.
I don't know. It
wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility.
It's not out of the realm of possibilities, but let's look at the teams that...
He would have to come out and publicly say, I want out of here.
And not only that, too, I mean, of the teams that are looking to get better today, how many of them need a Henrik Lundqvist on their team, right? I think
Vegas could use him as a backup.
Yeah. Oh, for what, though? What are we going to use him for? What are we going to give up for him?
That's what I mean is like how many teams that are in that kind of playoff hunt or on that cusp are like, hey, Lundqvist is the guy. The only team that really jumps out to me is
Philadelphia? They just got Mrazek.
Let's
call Mrazek what he is.
But I mean, Lundqvist's upgrade on Mrazek.
He's a good
Dallas,
average starter.
Dallas. I'm interested to hear this.
I mean, Dallas is a team. You look at them on paper. They're a good team. They got brand name players. They got generational players. They got Tyler Seguin, who, I mean, he can change a game.
But you're telling me that Ben Bishop's not a good enough goalie?
No, he's on Lundqvist's league. I don't think Ben Bishop.
I don't know if I can agree with that.
I'll give Ben Bishop.
You'd have said Calgary, I'd have believed you, but Dallas, no, I don't buy it.
Oh, I know who actually could use Lundqvist and is on a playoff cusp. That's Anaheim. Because they've been juggling all year. They cannot keep a healthy goalie in net.
Gibson can't stay healthy.
That's the difference, though. Is that a matter of they need a talent like Lundqvist, or is it an insurance policy?
Well, I mean,
no matter what, it's an upgrade.
I don't know about that.
It's an upgrade from Miller.
It's an upgrade from Miller. It's not an upgrade from Gibson.
Gibson's amazing.
Gibson might be the best goalie in the league right now, I think.
No, he can't stay on the ice. He's always out.
When he's healthy.
When he's healthy, though, Gibson's a game changer. That guy is a talent.
Making saves that horns are going off.
Yeah, horns are going off at this guy, and then they're like, never mind. He had it. He had it the whole time. I think that this could be kind of the opening. I mean, you look at some of the other trades. The one that I was talking about on the way here was the Plekanec trade. When the heck would you have ever seen an interdivisional team helping each other out? I mean, Toronto got better.
John Gibson's not even in the top 10 in goals against.
But he's a
fantastic goalie.
But he's a fantastic goalie. I mean, we can call it what it is.
He is 6th in the league in save percentage.
And let's look at Jonathan Quick, right? Where is he statistically? He's probably in that middle of the pack range. He also has 2 cups, and arguably should have 2 Conn Smythes.
Who's that?
Jonathan Quick in L.A., right?
Oh yeah.
So I mean, sometimes you look, especially for goalies. In hockey, you look at some of these kind of weird statistics and like, they're not that great in goals against. They're not great in regular saves. They're not great in regular season wins. But then...
Oh, don't get me wrong. You're preaching the choir with John Gibson. I'm just saying, there's a lot of goalies right now. He's right, though. The question is how good is John Gibson if he's sitting in the press box? He's not very good.
Well, I mean, he's not useful.
Yeah.
His utility right now to Anaheim is nothing. If he's not playing.
Did you go to that Anaheim game when it looked like at the end of the second period he literally tried to fake an injury and then literally had an injury?
No, I wasn't there, but I did happen to see that. And I mean, that's the kind of thing where, yeah, it looked like he kind of.
It looked like he was trying to draw a penalty, and I'm like, "What are you doing?"
He was definitely trying to draw a penalty, but you never know. Like when those guys' skates are in the ice, like if he caught a rut the wrong way, and then that it kind of
twisted his foot or
knee
something
a little bit,
or a groin pull or something kind of weird.
Now let's talk about before we go. Let's go back to the trades that happened and a trade that's got everybody kind of, I don't know, scratching their head, but kind of wondering why Vegas helped out Pittsburgh, and that's the Derek Brassard trade, the 3-team deal that basically the Golden Knights said, we're going to pay 40% of the rest of Brassard's salary, and if you believe what people have said, we're paying his salary to keep him out of the Western Conference. Is Derek Brassard still a guy that needs to be kept out of a conference? Like, is he that much of a contributor?
Absolutely, because he was going to Winnipeg otherwise.
Right, well, that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
So what we know about Tobias Lindbergh is he'll probably never see the ice in Vegas. So essentially, Vegas' end, they got a 4th-round pick.
Fourth round pick.
They got a 4th-round pick and Ryan Reeves to essentially
Winnipegger, which is my hometown.
There you go.
There you go.
A 4th-round pick and Ryan Reeves to essentially pay for Derek Brassard to play for the Penguins. How does Rutherford do it? He had no salary cap, and somehow he picks up
a guy that
top 1 or 2 center to play his 3rd line, or maybe even 4th line if Sheehan's going to play 3rd line. Sheehan will probably play 4th line.
He's got to play 4th, yeah.
So Derek Brassard's going to play 3rd line, and somehow they're going to come in under the salary cap with that. I don't know anything about Vincent Dunn going to Pittsburgh. I don't know anything about him.
Yeah.
As far as him, but I feel like Ottawa got fleeced again.
Well, this
for a team that's selling, they're gonna give up Cole, who's gone.
Well, they got 2 picks.
They got, yeah,
and this is why this trade.
They got a high 1st-round pick.
Even though you didn't give me an actual chance to express my views on it, this trade is why I think Boston overpaid for Rick Nash.
Okay.
And that I think that it was a bad trade because I think
you had the floor for a good minute. You could have said whatever the hell you want.
I tried to get a word in, and you kept cutting me off. But
that's
why I think that Boston overpaid for Nash because A, I don't think he's good enough anymore to put them over the top, and B, I think Pittsburgh runs away with the East now. I think this pickup of Brassard is too good for them. They are just unstoppable at this point.
I disagree because I still think that barring anything Tampa does crazy, they're still the best team in the East.
No, absolutely not. Pittsburgh can fucking run them over at this point.
Care to make it interesting?
Yeah, what do you want?
Ooh.
I don't know. I say if Tampa goes to the Cup Finals, you got to put a Penguins tattoo on your body.
No, we got to. They have to play head to head. It can't be just
Penguins and Bruins or Penguins and Lightning.
Penguins and Lightning.
All right.
And
is that even a possibility though? Like what would have to happen?
It would be in the final, the Cup final, or the conference finals.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that they both take care of their own business, one would have to go through the other.
All right, we'll just go easy. We'll go $100
right.
if they match up.
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. You heard it here.
We'll double if one sweeps. How about that?
Okay. Oh God, that would be
like that.
A sweep would be crazy.
I mean, but I think Golden Knights actually did pretty well in that. I mean, Brassard, but I mean, acquiring a guy like Ryan Reeves, like that guy is a factor when he plays.
I wanted Brassard for Vegas.
Yes.
I guess it just didn't materialize. I guess McPhee and I don't see eye to eye at that point.
And Ottawa just seems to be in a loser mentality. Like,
I mean,
oh my God.
The more I look at it, to say they got fleeced is crazy. What we know about Ian Cole is he's probably gone. He's just there as a salary dump. Gustafsson was the Swedish goalie in the juniors.
Yep.
So he could be pretty decent. He played him to a silver medal. The 1st-round pick is going to be high in a draft that, from what I understand, is about 15 great players, and then the rest is a crapshoot.
Where are they going to get this high pick from, though? Who do they?
They got the 1st-round pick from Pittsburgh in 2018, which they're making the playoffs, and they're winning the Cup, or they're winning the East, as far as Spike says.
Of course they are.
So, but let's talk about Vegas' perspective. Ryan Reeves, your thoughts?
I think he's a decent player for right now, and maybe something that could step it up and potentially lead this team, as well as somebody that could face punch somebody.
Well, I like the face punching. Yes.
Is he going to play?
Yes.
Oh yeah.
That's been the big
Ryan
question.
Reeves is a roster player. He's good enough talent-wise. Like, Ryan Reeves and I are about the same age. I think he's maybe a year or two older than me.
31 years old.
Yeah, so there you go. So he's a year older than me, and we both grew up in Winnipeg. And it's cool because in high school when he played, that was his big thing. He played high school hockey knowing he was going to have a chance at the NHL because he wanted to play with his friends. And he was a talent then. Like he could skate better than everybody, he had better hands, he had a better shot. So this isn't some goon they picked up and said, "Hey, like you're Mike Tyson, but we could put some skates on you and beat the snot out of people." This is a guy who actually has some skill, and I mean, I've seen the guy without his equipment on, and he's a monster. So this is a guy out there that all of a sudden now frees up some ice. Nobody's taking liberties against any Golden Knights player. Nobody's taking runs at Fleury knowing that Reeves is on the ice right afterwards. And I mean, in a day and age where teams are giving up their quote-unquote goons, he is the goon.
Mm-hmm. He's still a version of the goon who, like you said, can still open up the ice for... He's probably going to be on the fourth line at this point. So who is the casualty at this point? Lindbergh, Leipzig?
Yeah.
Probably Leipzig.
Mateau's
already been sent down.
already been sent down. I hope they keep Hika, by the way. Just a little note.
Hika's already back in Chicago.
Is he?
Yeah.
That's just because of the playoff, right? The AHL playoffs, because he has to be on the AHL roster before the trade deadline ends. I thought I read something that he has to be before the last game of the season in the AHL. He has to be on the roster to be officially eligible to play the playoffs.
Realistically, it's because we got Reeves and James Neal. That this signals that James Neal is healthy and that he'll be back.
And Theodore too, with Mateau going down, or is Reeves Mateau's spot?
Reeves is probably Mateau's spot.
So who goes when Theodore gets ready to come back? Is that Merrill back to the?
Probably Merrill, yeah. That's what I would assume, unless it's who else? Hunt, maybe.
Yeah, either way.
But I think Reeves is an upgrade in that situation.
He definitely is. The only downside I've seen to Vegas getting Reeves is that we're not going to see a round 4 of Reeves versus Engeland.
Yeah.
Which were some of the best fights in the past few years.
They've been pretty one-sided, from what I understand.
They definitely are. But I mean, they're still entertaining fights.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of a huge thing. Yeah, because with England on the team already, and with Reeves, I mean, if you're anybody in the West playing Vegas in any round, you're not taking liberties.
Of course not.
Not a chance.
Not now.
Yeah.
I mean, not a chance. Are you sitting there going, maybe we'll slide into Fleury here. Okay. That goes well.
Who wants to get face punched?
Yeah. Who wants their face rearranged? And I think Vegas is a big winner in this one. I mean, imagine that Pittsburgh now has the chance to say that Derek Brassarders are third or fourth line center.
That's what I was saying. That's what's scary about it is that you're talking about a guy who at worst plays number 2.
Yeah,
it can now be your number 4. So that's why.
Starting to regret that bet. He's starting to regret that bet.
No, I think Pittsburgh's fantastic, but it doesn't mean I think they're the best team in the East.
Oh, they definitely are.
I think that trade kind of puts them over the edge on Tampa Bay.
I think it all goes on Matt Murray at this point.
Well, I think once you get past that top-heavy kind of lineup of Tampa Bay, I mean, how do you keep competing with Pittsburgh at this point? Pittsburgh this year reminds me...
They got to get Palat back.
Yeah. But, I mean, Pittsburgh this year reminds me a lot of what Washington was roster-wise last year. I mean, when you went up and down and you have winners on your team, like they had the guy from L.A., Justin Williams. I mean, Justin Williams is a 3-time Stanley Cup winner. He's won cups with multiple teams. They had such a deep roster and found a way to lose. Pittsburgh has a winner's mentality.
Pittsburgh is how they found a way to lose.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh has a winner's mentality. They find ways to win, and they've upgraded. I mean, how does Tampa Bay now not have to either think, okay, wow, we need to make a move that changes things, or...
Realistically, for Tampa Bay to compete, they need our buddy Erik Karlsson.
Well, and that's where I was going next, is because I think they need, if you're telling me they need something, I think they need a superior defenseman in the back, and then they need another goal scorer on what you're saying, the third, fourth, late second, early third lines. Because I think with Braden Point, Palat coming back on the second line, Tyler Johnson, that's a great second line. Yanni Gourde on the third line, Killorn, if they can put a guy like Vanek or Maroon on that third line, I think they instantly can become a lot better than they already are at this point. But they have been in talks of looking at Vanek, looking at Maroon, and looking at Carlson at this point for Tampa, which everybody's looking at Carlson at this point.
Everybody's making calls about him, at least.
Well, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Well, you have to at least find out what the market is.
The market right now is going to be a lot different than the market in 365 days, though.
That's true.
And especially when you look at a guy like Vanek, I mean, who can't get any kind of clear direction from Vancouver. I mean, Vancouver's kind of strangled by the Sedin sisters. And
two girls, no cup.
You know, and whatever they're going to do. So, I mean, you know, you look at that and you're like, okay, Vanek's available. If Tampa Bay picks up Vanek, that's huge offensively.
Well, I would have liked him to get Michael Grabner, but that ship sailed on the 22nd. I thought he was the most underrated of all players. Him and Brassard, I was kind of hoping either Tampa or Vegas got one of those guys to kind of beef him up. But you're right. Vanek is the guy that's left at this point. Maroon, I'm not crazy about. Everybody kind of likes him because of his number, his contract number, $1.5 million, and it's expiring. But Vanek, like you said, is the guy who I believe is going to garner the most attention in the next. When does it end? In about 11 hours at this point?
A little less, yeah. 10 and a half.
Oh, yeah.
By the time we actually get this uploaded, it'll be the trade deadline will have been done. So.
Yeah, by the time I've fallen asleep at my desk at work tomorrow twice.
So we're going to do 2 more hours of this then, right?
Yeah, fucking clearly. Of course we are.
Yeah.
But what were your thoughts on Grabner kind of sneakily going to the Devils for basically a second-round pick and a guy who will probably never make his way over to the States?
Oh, I thought you were looking at Tony.
I'm just looking at anybody at this point. That question was open for anybody.
I think the Devils got somebody that they needed kind of a piece of puzzle, maybe make a playoff push and maybe compete for second round right now.
The question I have is that, you know, they have Taylor Hall, they've got, you know, Heishier, they've got a lot of guys on that team who can score. Obviously, he adds another element to that goal scoring. The problem is he doesn't really – he's kind of like the Carmelo Anthony of hockey. When he gets the puck, he shoots.
Yeah,
he doesn't pass.
And that was the thing. I didn't know Grabner's stats offhand, so I just had to look it up. Yeah.
I'm looking at his shots versus his assist ratio, and it's off the charts.
This year,
he gets the puck, and it stays on the stick.
25 goals, 6 assists. Last year, 27 goals, 13 assists. The year before that, he was 9-9, but he had a -4 in 80 games. Jesus Christ!
That's a fourth line year. Like
yeah, that's not great.
But he would have made a lot of sense in Vegas on the third line, though, with like Tuck and Carpenter.
What, you think over Belmar?
Yeah, I would move Belmar down to the fourth. Belmar, Nosek, and Player X.
And Reeves.
Reeves.
The guy we just talked about for 5 minutes?
Yeah, I am of the other side. Part of me doesn't think that he's going to sit. Part of me thinks he's going to sit in the press box a lot.
Who, Reeves?
Reeves, yeah. Come playoff time.
I think in the playoffs he might.
I disagree.
I feel like that's what we're trading him
That's
for.
what Bruins did in 2011 with Sean Thornton. Because he was their goon, and he was a scratch for half the game.
That's true enough.
That's I mean, I don't want to go back too far. I mean, go directly back to that. But my initial thought when we were talking about Reeves is, I think when we traded him, he's going to be in the press box for most of the playoffs. So, you know, it's great to have him, but you know, to really use him, you know, there's not a lot of fighting in the playoffs anymore. So, do you need him absolutely to be anything at this point? Maybe for the rest of the season, yeah. But that's where I kind of got confused why we were paying so much of Brassard's salary for essentially a fourth-round pick.
Yeah, I mean, there's still 20 or 21 games left for the Knights this year. I think 21.
Something
21,
like that,
yeah. We played 61 already.
Yeah, so... oh, fuck.
I mean, they're going to give him a shot on the ice during the regular season. If he can prove himself to be worthy offensively, I think I can see a reason for him to stay. But other than that, I don't know if he's going to dress a lot during the postseason.
Right, and that's the thing is, you know, assuming the Knights make the postseason, which at this point looks inevitable rather than just probable, you know, if you're taking Reeves out, who goes in on that fourth line? Is it Leipzig?
Oh, God. You know, I want to like the kid, but he's terrible.
I know. I made a joke on Reddit because the Golden
He makes me Leipzig too.
The Golden Knights posted a picture of Hillary Knight holding her gold medal and said, "Oh, we have a Golden Knight," and she said, "Oh, so you're saving a roster spot for me?" I'm like, "Wow, it's somebody bigger, stronger, faster, and just a better puck hitter,
Better looking than Leipzig.
Let's sign her up."
Yeah, might as well.
It could probably score better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, she did better in that
There's
skills.
a reason why Toronto was probably celebrating when they got rid of him, right? Like, they were like, wow, that worked. Like, oh my God.
Well, and that was the thing. Like, I want to like the kid. Like, the first piece of Knights apparel that I bought with a player name on it was a Leipzig T-shirt. Like, I enjoy watching the kid out there puck handling. Like, he can make moves, he can make plays. He's a smart, but he's way too small to be in this league, and he can't find
finish
the back of the net.
Yeah, he doesn't finish.
Well, I mean, this was a guy who was too small in the AHL. Like, I remember watching him back home when the Marlies would come into town to play the Moose, and I'd be like, I mean, this guy is talented as all get up and go, but he doesn't play beyond his size.
Right.
You know, it's like Kapanen for Toronto as well. Sami Kapanen's son, Kasperi.
Mm-hmm.
You know, same thing as Kasperi Kapanen. And Nylander as well. Toronto has this weird pattern of picking these ultra skilled guys that are tiny. And I mean, it's at what point do you kind of say, hey, wait a second, you guys are like sample sized hockey players. Like, you know, it's truly the case, you know, and I think when we're picking up sample-sized hockey players off of other people, I think Leipzig's the guy to go. And I've
never heard that before.
And I mean, especially when you start looking at the playoff run, how do you keep little Leipzig on the roster, and you're not looking at putting Reeves in?
Well, yeah, on the active roster, you're right.
You know what I mean? Like, you have to be thinking, okay, that's ice time that you need a guy like Reeves out there for.
Yeah.
I guess you do have a point as far as if I'm going to have one of them out there on skates, I'd probably rather have Reeves. So,
I mean, he wasn't in the press box in St. Louis.
No, you're right. He was on there.
You know, he was out there with St. Louis, and I mean, I think his playoff numbers were on par, if not maybe even slightly higher than his regular season numbers with St. Louis.
And given the fact that the fourth line doesn't play too much in the playoffs.
Yeah, this isn't a guy we're expecting 21 minutes out of. Like, this is a guy we're expecting 7 minutes.
Say 8 to 10, yeah, at the
most.
most.
We're expecting 7 hard minutes out of Ryan Reeves.
You know, it was like me in high school, 7 hard minutes. No, I'm just kidding.
You know, that's his role, and he knows it. And I'd rather have Reeves out there for 7 than Leipzig out there getting bullied for 12.
Right.
That's a fair assessment. All right, you convinced me. I think Reeves should get a sweater on for the postseason. Any other trades that jumped out at you guys that kind of, you know, were sneaky or good or going to benefit somebody, or what the hell were they thinking? Kind of things. My first one was the fact that the Kings, and you like Quick, but they traded Kemper for Wedgwood essentially, and Reeder was a throw-in in that point. But I thought Darcy Kemper was a fantastic, potentially heir apparent, and if they were going to trade him, they're going to get a lot more than that for him.
Yeah, it's kind of that idea that, I mean, Boston overpays for Rick Nash, and LA undertrades and undervalues Darcy Kemper. It's
just like when they traded a first-round pick for Ben Bishop.
Well, it's like
to rent him for a backup spot.
Well, yeah, you know what I mean? It's like when you see that happen, it's almost like you kind of have to wonder, does LA know something the rest of us don't? Like, oh, he's about to have a leg removed or something?
10-1 and 3.
Yeah,
I mean.
like, does he have the world's biggest blood clot in his leg?
Or does Jonathan Quick have dirt on the front office that he's never going to get traded?
Yeah, right? Like,
he's going to play until he falls over
exactly,
on the ice.
Right? Did he get, touched by a GM or something, right? So, pre-draft day, he got a little feel up, and he's like, guess what? Hey, remember that time?
Yeah.
Hashtag me too. Wow. But anyway.
Where the fuck is this conversation going?
But now it creates kind of an interesting is not the right word, because let's face it, the Coyotes are a train wreck. But you have Antti Ranta, however you say his name, who is playing pretty well, all things considered, for Phoenix or Arizona. And now you bring in this guy. I mean, at what point? I feel like the Coyotes just continue to just take 2 steps forward, 10 steps back. They're just not they're not a team interested in moving in the right direction.
Let's just relocate them, put a second team in Winnipeg, and call it a day.
Yeah, they're interested in moving
Second team in Winnipeg.
To a different city.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've been trying to get out of Glendale because I don't know if you guys have made the trip down to the Arizona Stadium, but it's not in a great spot for sports. It's
right next to the football stadium?
Right next to the football stadium, but it's one small road in and out of Phoenix that has no easy access to the highway. It's a pain in the ass to get anywhere and to get to that arena. It's not a great setup. And the fact that the team sucks isn't helping anything with that.
Well, it's like that one article that you were reading earlier about a puck going over the glass in Arizona.
Oh, yeah. There was a headline. The color commentator from the Canucks, when the puck went over the glass and into the stands, he said, "Don't worry, it's not going to hit anybody." But yeah, no, it's not a great situation. So.
Oh, I get it now, because there's nobody in the stands.
Yeah.
Took me a second. I'm like, why wouldn't it hit anybody? There's people there. Yeah. But now I realize because there aren't people there.
There's more. I think there's more there's more Arizona Coyotes fans in Arizona that watch the games on TV than go live, which is the problem.
Well, you're right, because Glendale's so far away from the rest of the city of Phoenix.
Yeah.
Like, I get it, going to 8 NFL games makes sense because the NFL's king, but to go to 40 plus, 41, 44 NHL games is a little different. You're right. We went to it at what do they call it, the Gila River Arena.
Yep.
I think it's a fantastic spot.
Oh, yeah.
For me coming in for 2 games. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a fun little place.
Yeah, that whole district or neighborhood area is awesome. But you're right.
Would you go there 41 times a year? Really?
If I lived over there, yes. If I lived in downtown Phoenix, no.
Exactly, right?
Right. So, but part of the problem is that, again, the on-ice product has been garbage. When did they make they made the conference finals,
not too long ago. Yeah, 5 years ago. It's not that long ago.
It was like 2012, I believe.
Yeah,
it was the year Vancouver made it, wasn't it? Vancouver had to beat them.
No, I think it was the year LA won the cup.
Right. It was LA's last cup. That's right. They played LA in the conference finals.
Yeah, so it was
and they had a couple of good runs before that too. Like, lest we forget, like Mike Smith carried them through a couple of years
definitely.
in the playoffs. But I mean, those days are done too.
Right. So that's the thing. Any of the moves that they make now, like this trade that they have, where now they have 2, relatively good goalies and basically nothing else on that roster.
Excuse me, that was the Kings. Okay, I apologize.
Then I don't know what to make of it from Arizona's end. I don't know what they're trying to do. I don't know what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, especially considering the step-on move in the offseason. I mean, that's paid dividends so far. This is a team, again, they're like the Miami Dolphins of the NHL. They stay relevant by being irrelevant. And
when there's stuff to do, especially like now, you're going to watch baseball at this point in Phoenix.
Well, that's the thing, right? Yeah. I mean, people are making that migration. I mean, now do you start looking at potential trades out of there? Do you start looking at some of these other teams that are looking? I mean, what was LA thinking?
That's my question. Wedgwood was average, and Kemper played fine. There's got to be something they see that, like you said, there's got to be something that we don't see.
Yeah, like that's what I mean. Is like, as I said, does Kemper have like the world's biggest blood clot right in his groin that's like spreading up his like abdomen? That they're like half of him is going to be surgically removed. They don't know yet, and it's one of these things. And I mean, if LA, do they have that much confidence in Quick? This is a guy who's spent probably the last few years injured more time than he's been playing.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're like, oh, this is the first year he's healthy in 5 years. We'll make another cup run. Sure, but I mean, you were willing to overpay for Ben Bishop? Was your backup at one point? Like,
he said that with such vitriol, and yet
he hates Ben Bishop.
No, it's not that I hate it. No, it's not that I hate Ben Bishop. It's that Ben Bishop is a number 1 goalie.
Right.
And you're paid.
Not according to you in Dallas, though, that you just said earlier in the show.
I don't think he's as good a number 1 goalie as Henrik Lundqvist. That's my point.
If you had to start a team today with Lundqvist or Bishop, who do you start a team with?
I go with Lundqvist every time. You have to pick one.
Yeah, come on, man. You gotta play the game by the rules.
Yeah, you gotta pick one token, Tony. Here we go.
I started with Bishop at this point.
I guess Bishop.
You guess Bishop.
I guess Bishop.
I take Bishop.
Okay. No, okay. The one thing I'm going to say is this.
Kindly leave.
I like Ben Bishop as much as the next guy. And I think Ben Bishop's value speaks for itself, that he's so good that Tampa Bay wanted him with one leg in net more than they wanted Andrei Vasilevsky when they made their run against Chicago.
Because Vasilevsky was 20 years old.
Okay, but no. But here's the point, though. This kind of goes to, and we're kind of diverging back a little bit here, but this goes back to that point that you had made about all roads go through Tampa versus, well, no, they don't. They actually go through Pittsburgh, in that I've yet to be sold on Andrei Vasilevsky as a goalie. I think this year could end up being those kind of like Jim Carrey years, where he kind of gets the Vezina and then disappears. And this is a guy that they've never had full faith as being a number one. I think that they got rid of Ben Bishop because he's never been the same goalie since he hurt his leg in that cup run. And I'm not sold on it. So you have a goalie that I don't even think the organization is sold on in Tampa Bay. And I mean, so what? He's been healthy. I guess that was worth it. But I don't see an unproven goalie beating the monsters that you now have lined up in the East in Tuukka Rask in Boston and Matt Murray, who's come in and two cups.
If there's any unproven goalie who's had the best quality of experience he could have, it's Vasilevsky. Came in against the Blackhawks in the finals. Came in and played the entire postseason last year. And to be honest with you, I'm the complete reverse of that. I was more convinced that Vasilevsky was the guy when he was the backup than now when he's the starter. I'm not as convinced, but I think he can actually hold his weight with Tuukka and Murray. If anything, Murray has been just average by standards this year compared to what he's been in the last 2 cup years.
Right, but then again, that goes to like that Jonathan Quick argument I made earlier, right? That if you look at just the pure numbers of this person versus that person, there's guys in the West that have fantastic numbers compared to a guy like Jonathan Quick. 2 Stanley Cups don't lie.
No, I agree.
And I think with Vasilevsky and Murray,
but he was a product of getting hot at the right time. I mean, we're talking about the 8th seed when they won against the who was it?
Devils. They beat an overachieving New Jersey Devil team.
Yeah, exactly.
Nobody would have ever thought that.
And then they beat New York in their other one.
But let's forget, too, when they were the 8th team, 8th seed, they were 1 point out of 3rd, right? It was like they were the weakest division in the league.
Right. Well, it was also they fired their coach mid-season, and they had that kind of late surge towards the end. So, they needed to... It wasn't an 8th seed because the entirety of their season was mired in mediocrity. It was they were shit to begin with, got a new coach, and became a lot better.
But yes, so going back to the whole Phoenix thing, I mean, they picked up 2 kind of tier 2 starters.
Reeder and Wedgwood.
Yeah. And I mean, what's the end game? Every year in Phoenix has to be a fire sale at this point. Or Arizona, rather. At what point?
That was the same question I had with the Phaneuf trade.
Yeah.
Well, what's the end game here?
Why are you giving up Gaborik, who is who has been a stud for them in the playoffs every year he's been there, for Phaneuf, who we've had enough of kind of everywhere he's played.
Yeah, we've had enough of him. Come on, you saw that one coming. Rob Blake pretty much believes that Wedgwood can add a piece, a strong, steady backup, which, you had that in Kemper. I guess Reeder was the piece that they wanted because they ideally want to have a line of Reeder, Kempe, and Trevor Lewis, which is basically a lot of speed and potentially a lot of goals. So maybe Reeder was more of the piece than Wedgwood.
Yeah, and you need to give up, but it's a big give up to make. But I guess, again, they lost something with Gaborik, too, right? I think you look at the bigger picture here. They gave up Gaborik, a week ago or 2 weeks ago? So that kind of pieced that one together that, okay, wait a second, maybe they think Gaborik's lost a step. Mm-hmm. So they need to get faster.
Well, I think we can all agree that Gaborik's lost a step. The question is Reeder, who was a second-line guy in Arizona, is he a legit, top 6 forward in L.A.? That's the question.
Yeah. And does he provide you with an upgrade to losing Gaborik and his proven playoff performance in LA? I mean, he's put up good playoff numbers every year he's been in LA.
Maybe they just believe they're going to go with this team, kind of build for the future, and potentially try to sneak in the playoffs, right? I guess they've taken the expectation off, but if they happen to get in, then hooray us at that point. So, I don't know. The rest of the season is going to be interesting because now clearly Spike thinks that Pittsburgh is going for a three-peat at this point.
Oh, absolutely. No, there's just no doubt in my mind after that, after the Broussard trade.
Thanks for that, 100. You still believe it's going to be Vegas and Pittsburgh at this point?
I think it's more likely Nashville and Pittsburgh again. I think we see a...
Think you see a repeat?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
I see that. I honestly think that a combination of either Nashville / Winnipeg gets hot, Vegas kind of tapers off a little bit at the end of the season.
I don't trust Hellbuck or whatever the fuck his name is.
Hellebuck?
Hell Buick.
The All-Star game spoke for itself, right? You know, when you looked at how that mini tournament went, Central Division starts with Pecorine. They're up 4-0 in his half. Hellebuck goes in, they lose.
Hold my beer.
You know, it's like, it's one of those things, and I think that's a good point when it comes to Winnipeg, right? Is I don't trust Hellebuck either. I love him. I'm a Winnipegger, so he's our guy, but again, this is a guy who's been given the keys to the house twice.
Right.
You know, at one point they had to call back up Pavelec.
Right. Well, all I'm saying is it's not necessarily about who comes out of the West. I just don't see Vegas being the number 1 seed, and I think they need that home ice advantage.
I think Winnipeg needs the home ice advantage as well,
in order to,
and Nashville
to advance. But I think Nashville can. Any of those 3 teams wouldn't surprise me. If I had to bet right now, I'd put my money on Nashville coming out of the West.
The only one of those 3 I wouldn't is Winnipeg. I think there are teams that pose challenges, and especially with their playoff experiences, to Winnipeg. Like with Winnipeg, we're talking about a team of players. Some of them have never played a playoff game, and some of them, the playoff games they have played, were played so badly. You know, it's like a child who just hasn't been disciplined. It's
Wow.
You know, you kind of have to look at that. At what point do you guys want to start playing well? And I mean, when they played Anaheim a few years ago, they sucked on every single measure.
I remember that. Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like it was one of those, because there's been in history some 4-0 series that all 4 games were close. And you're like, you know what? That was actually a closer 4-game series than some 7-game series. Whoa, where
this isn't 3D podcast, bro.
and
on his face bunching.
You know, and with Winnipeg, you know, these are guys that played badly. They got smoked, and now their youngsters haven't even played. Ehlers hasn't played a playoff game. Lowry hasn't played a playoff game. Connor hasn't played a playoff game. Laine hasn't played a playoff game. Hellebuck hasn't played a playoff game.
Right. Oh, yeah, no.
Myers hasn't even played a playoff game.
But look at this. I mean, if the season ended today, they would have to go through Minnesota at home, and then more than likely Nashville, provided they don't lose to Dallas. But if Nashville loses to Dallas, they got to go through Dallas.
Who's been a tough matchup for them.
Right. And then they got to go through, let's just say Vegas gets to the finals. They got to go through those 3 teams. And they got to go through Vegas on the road. So Winnipeg right now would be a tough...
It'd be a tough road.
Tough one to pick. I'd pick Minnesota before I picked Winnipeg at that point.
I mean, I like Nashville and I like Vegas.
Right, and I'm just saying this as a playoff seeding thing. I see Vegas falling out of the number 1 seed to a number 2 or even a number 3, losing that home ice, fucking up their positioning, and then not being able to sneak out of the West like some people are starting to think they have the ability to. I don't. Now, again, we've still got 11 hours before the trade deadline. If a certain player with the initials EK comes to Las Vegas,
Evander Kane.
I mean, he
would be good too.
yeah.
He is a former 30-goal scorer.
Yeah,
right?
that wouldn't be the worst move in the world. But
and he would do well in Vegas.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Better than he does in Buffalo.
Right now he's on the bench in Buffalo.
You can say that. Although the one thing I will say is that somebody pointed out that if Vegas makes another minor deal, it could be for a Buffalo player named Benoit Pouliot, who there is only one player in the history of the NHL that I fucking despise more than Benoit Pouliot, and that's Hal Gill. And these are two players that are completely fucking worthless for their entireties of their careers. Benoit Pouliot is basically the Jamarcus Russell of the NHL, where he had tremendous talent. Everybody thought he was fucking amazing, and he comes in, I think he was like the 4th overall pick, and he's never put up numbers better than a fucking, like, bottom of the barrel 4th liner.
Hal Gill was not as bad as Benoit Pouliot.
I'll tell you why Hal Gill drove me fucking crazy. First of all, dude is from the Boston area, went to school in Providence, and got booed on home ice in Boston because motherfucker was like 6'5" defenseman, clocking in at like 230, played like a fucking wounded cupcake on the ice, wouldn't hit a goddamn soul, couldn't pass the puck, couldn't stick handle, couldn't shoot, could barely fucking move, and yet he kept getting contracts from the Boston front office. Drove me absolutely out of my mind.
Tell us how you really feel.
That guy I fucking hate, but Benoit Pouliot, if Vegas trades for him, I'm going to be really fucking upset.
All right, who do we think is like the, if I can ask one here, is who do we think is like the number one guy to go today? Like the biggest name, biggest trade do we see move, and who kind of tries to make the claim for them?
Vanek and Maroon go today. I mean, if you're saying realistically, I mean, Erik Karlsson, this deal is all dreaming right now.
Yeah, it's fictitious.
I mean, he could go, but I don't know if who's gonna pull that trigger right now. I mean, realistically, I would hope. It all depends. I mean, what we've heard right now, like what you've heard from Vegas, is what Tuck.
I heard from Vegas it would be Tuck, Leipzig.
First round pick, obviously.
First, and I forget if it was a first this year and a second next year, or a first this year and a prospect.
Now, see, if we don't have to give up any one of the 3 guys we just drafted, Glass, Suzuki, or Brandstrom, I would pull the trigger on that. But I have a feeling one of those guys is in
It'd probably be Brandstrom, if anybody.
See, that's the one I wouldn't pull the trigger on.
Yeah. So, and that's part of the problem. But the flip side of that is you're getting a 27-year-old Norris Trophy winning defender
For 1.5 years.
for 1.5 years. But
And then what?
Then you still have the ability to sign him in free agency, and God knows Vegas has plenty of fucking cap room. And he, even while he's here, between him and Engeland teaching the young guys how to play the position, that is invaluable.
And what is he, 2-time or 3-time Norris Trophy winner? He's a multiple-time Norris Trophy winner.
Yeah, I actually don't know offhand. I know you're right, it is multiple times. I don't know how many.
I just don't know if I mean, again, from what I've seen just basically on the young prospect report, all 3 of those guys are fantastic so far. How will they translate to the NHL? I don't know.
The bigger problem, too, is the way that you have, one of the ways, or the primary way that you have playoff success is through the power play. And the one thing Vegas does not have is that quarterbacking defender on the power play that can run things for you. They just haven't had somebody step up and do that, and that's Erik Karlsson. Now, granted, again, we are going to have to pay to overpay to get him, but
maybe not. I don't think if it's a Tuck first and a second and
Leipzig,
I don't think that's overpaying at all. I actually think we end up getting a better deal than that. I'm okay giving up one of our first-round picks that we haven't drafted yet versus one of the ones that we have drafted already.
Yeah, but if it's Brandstrom instead of the
problem is, you're right. Nash set the market, so you're talking. Let's just say Nash is the market. You got a first, you got 2 current NHLers
and a 7th,
a prospect and a 7th, because that defenseman was a prospect, correct?
Yeah, he is a prospect.
So let's say
and
first pick, a high,
and Spooner's probably going to get flipped for even more picks. So you think another 2?
Well, that you can't. You got to look at it as face value.
Okay, so in that case, then yeah,
because I can't tell. McPhee's not going to give you something. He's not going to put something together for you to flip, unless that's your. That's their choice to flip what they want. So okay, so then you say that one of the players is a flippable player. It's not Tuck. They want to keep Tuck. He's 21 years old. Leipzig's. What are you going to flip him for? Another 7th or 6th or 7th round pick? Could you see him trading Tuck and Lindbergh at that point? Because Lindbergh could probably add value as a 4th liner to somebody. He was pretty decent in New York, which made me excited when he came to Vegas. So could he recapture some of that New York magic?
Yeah, I don't know.
Anyways, point being is, like you said, a first, another pick, a young stud, and another player who's currently on the roster,
Right, so-
and maybe a prospect.
Yeah. So that's going to be the asking price.
For Erik Karlsson, or
Karlsson.
more. That's the minimum.
Well, it will be Karlsson and Bobby Ryan.
Well, yeah, because you got to take
knows-
on another $7 million.
God knows Ottawa wants to get out of that contract.
Yeah, you keep bad mouthing Bobby Ryan, but I like him.
Yeah,
I think he could.
He's not worth the price. Is my biggest. Question.
Agreed, but if we have to give up Tuck, I think he's a damn good filler right there in the third
man,
line.
if we could trade for Bobby Ryan, it's.
Well, I'm saying if you have to give up Tuck, obviously that hurts because he's the future.
Yeah.
But right now, to put Bobby Ryan on the third line would be pretty good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Ottawa's move has been that they want to package Karlsson and Bobby Ryan, and they're looking at teams that can take on Bobby Ryan's contract.
Right now, that's pretty much just Vegas and San Jose at this point.
That's what makes, yeah. I mean, the thing we forget about Bobby Ryan is, he was the second overall pick behind Crosby in his draft year to Anaheim. Yep. Bobby Ryan was the second overall pick behind Sidney Crosby.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's the first thing. Second thing is his very first hat trick, I believe, was actually like a 4 or 5 goal game in which all of the goals were highlight reel goals. Bobby Ryan can play. He's again kind of that Matt Duchene kind of Alexander Semeny kind of attitude. I mean, this is why, what's his name? Brian Burke, when he was picking the U.S. Olympic team for 2010, left him off of the roster. And there was an argument to be made that was Bobby Ryan's best time of his career. And was the most dynamic player possible for the U.S. And Brian Burke says his work ethic and his attitude isn't there. This is a guy who's kind of a cancer in the dressing room, and we don't want him. And he said this is not a cut up on his skills because I drafted him to Anaheim. I was the guy that drafted him to Anaheim and knew that there's talent there. I just don't know in a 8-day tournament if he's the guy for our team. I think so. If you can, move Tuck, who he'll be a good player. I don't know if Tuck has the same up potential that Ryan has as of right now. And what they can accomplish today versus tomorrow with Tuck.
Right, and that's the thing is, the plan for Vegas has always been playoffs in 3 years, cup in 6.
Yeah.
So if they have a legitimate chance to make it this year, do they mortgage the future in order to do that?
Yeah. And is Tuck that big of a mortgage, really? Like, I like Alex Tuck. He's he's a good player. I don't think he's Bobby Ryan caliber player.
What the?
What are you looking at?
So I'm looking up Bobby Ryan, and you got to listen to this.
All right.
So Ryan was born Robert Shane Stevenson in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, and grew up in Collinswood, New Jersey. In October 1997, Ryan's father, Bob Stevenson, an insurance company owner, badly beat Ryan's mother, Melody, in a drunken rage, and leaving her hospitalized with 4 broken ribs. Blah, blah, blah. She was injured. His father was charged with attempted murder and jumped bail, fleeing to Canada. Ryan and his wife forgave him and joined him on the lam in Canada, living under the assumed names, is where he got the name Bobby Ryan. The family eventually relocated to El Segundo, California, so that Ryan could play elite youth hockey. And in 2000, Ryan's father was arrested by the U.S. Marshals after supporting his family as a professional gambler for 5 years. You can't make this stuff up, man.
Wow.
I think Bobby Ryan just became my favorite player.
Bobby Ryan.
Actually, you know what I want to do?
Sounds like
NHL
a good fit for
fugitives.
Vegas.
Yeah. I think Bobby Ryan, more than a trade, needs a hug. You know?
He needs a shrink.
He just needs a hug and someone to tell him it'll all be okay.
Holy cow.
This is a safe place. I bet he's one of those persons when someone raises their hand to give him a high five, you gotta suddenly flinches. Yeah, just like, uh-oh. They're like, it's all good. It's all good.
All right. Well, I think that is a very good stopping point.
Got a little off the rails.
So we're going to have to reassess the impact of the trades that happened, because obviously we're going to have another episode in the end of the week, so we'll discuss more of what's gone down in the next, 11 hours? Is that what we said it was?
No,
10 hours. 10 hours, yeah. So, all right. Well, this was good. We got in some good shit. Any other parting comments? Mr. Hansen, Mr. Fedorov?
Check out our sponsors, 12 Ounce Sports Radio.
We We got more.
Well, I'm not sure after this episode.
No, he's right. You can listen to us on 12 Ounce Sports Radio. You can catch him at 12ozsportsradio.com. We are on the Forward Mile Podcast Network. You can check them out at forwardmile.com. We also want to say a special thanks to our sponsors, Chai Poker at chaipoker.net. You can catch them over on their website.
When did that happen?
They've been here since episode 2.
What?
Yeah,
They've been here longer than you, Spiker.
Oh, fuck. All right.
Yeah.
Even I knew that one.
You're quilting on the job. All right, for Sonny, for Token Tony, for Spike, I am Aaron. We appreciate you listening. And for the producer in the studio, she says, thank you. We are out.